and welcome everyone to episode 189 of the Warhammer podcast, known as Lookout Sir. My name's Dan, and it's my pleasure, privilege even, to introduce my special friend. No, he's not just me putting on a silly, posh voice. It is, of course... Don't laugh at that, Phil. Don't laugh. It's Phil!
Hello. Maybe I do have a silly posh voice. But I too would have a silly posh voice if, Dan's hand was up me like a puppet, using his ventriloquist skills.
That is true. And many a human being has been given a posh voice by virtue of the proximity of my hand.
Exactly.
That's it. It's such a gift that I possess. These, slippery fingers can bring out the posh in anyone.
Well, yeah, it would indeed.
Yeah, absolutely. And after that whole load of nonsense, what are we talking about in episode 189, Phil?
Let me just recompose myself.
Yeah, exactly.
We are talking about your adventures to Warhammer World.
Technically mine and Richie's adventures, although he didn't appear to add his contribution. Not that we invited him on to do so. We're probably bitter about that, but...
I know, but we ran out of time, basically, because, you only went last weekend from the recording of when this is out. So, there was only so many days in the world in which we could record this. So yours and Richard's adventures doing, sorry for you 40k fans, Age of Sigmar events. So we're talking about Age of Sigmar this week, despite the name of the podcast saying 40k on it. So sorry for the 40k fans. There will be some good, juicy 40k content at the end, in the outro. We do a fair bit of... there is AOS stuff in there as well, but there's a decent chunk of 40k content for your little ears.
Exactly. Basically, it's fair to say this one was a bit of a rush job. Me and Phil are up against some big hobby projects. Mine,
yours was to blame, Dan, not mine.
Well, indeed. But, yours is an ongoing thing as well, and I'm sure you benefited from the time.
I had an extra evening of painting, which I very much enjoyed. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. You benefited from the time, and you, dear listener, benefit from the 5-star review.
Peter!
Oh, hello, Dad.
What are you doing in here, son?
Oh,
What have I told you about wasting your time with these little plastic figurines?
It's not a waste of time, I like it.
How dare you talk back to me, Peter? It's about time you grew up.
I don't want to grow up. Oh, man, maybe there's something on the radio. Yeah, this is nicer.
Peter!
What's that?
That's right, it's me, the ghost of a award-winning TV and radio presenter, Jeremy Beadle.
Jeremy Beadle?
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
Now, let me tell you here, Sonny, my dad was always telling me to grow up, and I never did. And look how successful I was. So ignore him, Peter, and keep playing with that little plastic crack. And while you're at it, listen to the Lookout Sir podcast, which right now, it's time for the 5-star review.
Wow, thanks, Jeremy.
Who are you talking to with there, son?
Jeremy Beadle.
What? No!
This week's 5-star review comes from where, Phil?
I'm going to be confident. I'm going to manifest it. Apple Podcasts of Great Britain.
Unfortunately, Phil, you're quite wrong. Quite wrong. If you were to take a second guess, where would you say?
Apple Podcasts of America.
No, I'm afraid not, Phil. It's not Apple Podcasts at all this time.
Oh.
Could you guess what it is now?
Facebook.
Yay! The Lookout Sir Facebook page, everybody. We haven't done this in ages. And actually, what's really lovely is there's a few new reviews on there, which is great.
Ooh, brilliant.
I don't know. When's the last time you actually checked the Facebook reviews?
Never.
Never. Well, there you go.
That's your job, Dan. I don't do that. I will occasionally comment on the comments. Yeah, and that's about as much as I do. I don't check the messages because that's meant to also be your job on Facebook. Which
I'll pick up the slack. I'll get better at it. I've been absent on the socials this year, so I'm going to go through the backlog. I'm going to take care of business. But we got some really nice reviews on here as well, Phil.
Brilliant.
like, sincerely, I'm genuinely heartwarmed by the amazing, lovely things that people are saying about our silly little podcast. So, thank you so much, everyone, for actually going out there and doing it. But, this particular 5-star review comes by way of Matthew, surname withheld, and they've left us a 5-star review on the Lookout Sir Facebook page. And if you would like to be like Matthew, you need only do what, Phil?
Well, you can leave us a 5-star review. You can have yourself available to have Dan's hand puppeteer you at any moment's notice. You can also buy our merch, which, having spoken to a couple of our members, try to purchase, but the website has been down for about the last month. So those links are now working. We're back up and running. Lee sorted out the issues that he had with the website host that was causing the issues. So yes, buy all of that, t-shirts, and I guess hoodies, maybe. I think we do hoodies. I'm not sure. In time for Christmas.
What I'm going to say is, Phil, is I think sincerely, and I know we say a lot of hyperbole, but I think that's part of the 25 mission statement is we need a more comprehensive and overhauled merchandise strategy.
For sure. We're going to do dice. We're going to do objective markers. We're going to do mugs. We're going to do tattoos. We're going to do it all.
Are we going to get the tattoo? I suppose we've been doing this now for over 6 years. So it almost feels like we should etch it on our skin.
I mean, maybe if we get to episode 200, which we're not that
which
far
is
off.
Not far off, mate.
Maybe that's what we do. Yeah.
That's how we marked episode 200. We're going to get tattoos.
Matching tattoos that basically we get half each, and then when we come together with our fists, they form the Lookout Sir wording. That's how we're going to do it.
So you're going to have Look S, or am I going to have? Or are we going to have that? Or are you going to have? I guess Out Ire.
Well, yeah, yeah. I don't.
It depends. It depends if you're stacking the Sir, I suppose.
No, I think it would have to all just be go in one line. I think.
Yeah.
So we split out down the middle. Someone gets Look, one person gets Sir.
Looko and Ootser.
Yeah, basically.
Fair. Anyway. Phil's absolutely right. There is merchandise, so why not go and get it? Because we're going to overhaul it. So you could be one of the OGs that has the original stuff before we overhaul it and come up with some new things. Although we're lazy, so we'll probably keep that stuff in perpetuity. It doesn't cost us anything. No. I mean, Lee just fulfills the orders as and when they come in, so it's easy peasy.
Totally. I was going to say, it doesn't cost us anything. It doesn't really make us anything either. All the money goes to Lee.
Yeah, basically. To be fair, though, I mean, fair play to Lee. He's a good lad, and he's a lovely bloke who runs a really lovely little merch business. So go check it out if you get a chance. Even if you're not interested in Lookout Sir stuff, there's loads of really fun stuff over at Rev Level worth checking out. And to be fair to Lee, I hardly ever remember to plug his broader business concerns. Go check him out. He's a great supporter of the pod and a really lovely human to boot. So, Christmas is coming around the corner. So, show him some love. As I say, merch. There's also Patreon. We didn't talk about it, but there is. Patreon's really great. That's another thing we need to really look at in 25. I think that's something I'd really like to put a bit of attention into. Also, I keep saying it. I think we definitely need to strategize around that and do more. We've got the perfect ideas, but we've just yet to have the free time to do them. So hopefully, one time soon. We are just mad busy. I know. I mean, yeah. And the problem is, as well, truthfully, is anything we do for Patreon kind of takes away from the core proposition. That's the thing, and kind of the reason we have the Patreon is to keep the core proposition alive. So it's almost like we work on the assertion that just keeping doing what we're doing is the right thing to do. But we do also feel like we could be doing more for patrons just because at the end of the day, you guys clearly like the show enough to support us. So we should do more to show that love back. But again, we'll try and think about it. It's life is.
We should do the what Dan was suggested, the Lookout Sire, the fantasy podcast spin-off.
Well, there you go. There's Patreon again. Sincerely, even though, as we were saying, we don't do the best job of showing it. Genuinely really love and appreciate all of our patrons. I think, it means a lot to us in this really kind of financially trying time that people are able to show that support and give us the ability to continue doing this without, falling into absurd levels of debt. Neither me and Phil are going to be able to retire as rich men off the back of Lookout Sir, but we're certainly able to continue doing it because our patrons make it financially viable, which is really, really lovely. So, yeah, huge thank you to them. And if you'd like to be amongst them, chuck us a couple of quid. It would really mean a lot to us. But at the same time, the fact that you're just listening at all is wonderful. So we're pretty happy with that from the outset. And then, last thing is if you would like to be like Matthew, who's left us a 5-star review, you can do so by leaving us a 5-star review in locations where 5-star reviews can be left, such as Facebook, such as iTunes, such as Spotify, although you can't write any words to accompany that. But you can tick those 5 stars, which I think helps us out a bit. I think we do quite well on Spotify within the 40K and Warhammer space because, we've got quite a lot of really lovely people who've given us a 5-star rating on there. So, that's cool. Audible as well. Don't forget Audible.
Yeah. Well, you can give us 5 stars for, was it narration and story?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Which is super lovely. But on this occasion, Matthew, name withheld, has left us a 5-star review on Facebook. So we're going to read it out. So Matthew, surname withheld, says, great podcast. Been a long time listener. Good mix of topics covered and not the usual GW fanboying found in a lot of other casts. Proper, down-to-earth blokes. There you go. How was the last time you were called a bloke, Phil?
Well, I'm a bloke. What do you mean?
I'm a bloke. I'm a bloody blokey bloke.
Pup.
I don't think I've been referred to as a bloke. Well, I don't think you were almost ever until now, obviously.
I mean, it's, an accolade I will happily wear.
Absolutely. As you should. As a down-to-earth bloke that you are, you will wear it, but not draw attention to it, I suppose.
Well, yes, indeed.
Yeah. Indeed. But no, sincerely, Matthew, thank you so much for your 5-star review, mate. It really means the world to us. And I think, at the end of the day, it's really great to know that you're enjoying the pod and that ultimately you're getting something of value out of it. And so much so that you were nice enough to leave us a 5-star review. And that means a lot. So, yeah, thank you. You're a great human being. And to elaborate on that, here's Phil.
Thank you, Matthew. Glad you're enjoying the show. Glad you've been a long-time listener. Back when? The wee days, maybe when Joe was around, those early years. We're glad you're enjoying it. Glad you think we're sort of, I guess, nice and balanced, normal blokes, blokey blokes, and that we're not GW shills, because no one wants to be one of those. Although, in all seriousness, obviously we do like the products, we do talk about it, we try and be positive, but obviously we have an air of criticism once in a while, and by that I mean probably on a half-hourly basis.
That's it. I worry I'm overly critical about things in the upcoming AOS event review, to be fair. But I suppose that's really going to just come down to how well I edit it.
Oh, I mean, I don't remember you being overly negative of it personally.
I got to be honest with you, Phil. When we were recording, I was so out of my tree. Like, I literally, I'd hardly slept. My voice was sounding terrible. I had a massive banging headache. I'm terrified that I may have been in some kind of like fugue state and said all sorts of mad.
No, I think it was all fine. Yeah, that I remember. But then I've got a terrible memory, so maybe you said some utterly scandalous nonsense, and I just can't remember it.
Well, let's discover together as we move on to the next bit. Thank you very much for the 5-star review, Matthew. You're a saint. Transitional noise.
Alrighty, guys. Oh, it's Phil. It's me doing the intro for a change. Why could that be? Dan is sick. He's off. I've got someone else. It's a new show entirely. I'm taking over. Sadly, that's not entirely the case. Dan is still here, but he was away at Warhammer World weekend. He has a raspy, croaky frog in his throat. Isn't that right, Dan?
Yeah, it is, mate. Yeah, no, the acoustics in Warhammer World leave much to be desired. I don't know how many of you have been lucky enough to travel and spend time there, but they have very high ceilings. So, a whole weekend of gaming definitely. I'm paying the toll on my voice right now, so it seemed fair that we not completely shock you with that, but allow Phil to intro it and ease you into the fact that I sound a little bit worse for wears. But I'm not ill. I'm just dealing with damaged vocal cords. That's what's going on.
Overindulged.
Overindulged, yeah, totally, man, totally. Yeah, because I was up at Warhammer World playing in the Age of Sigmar Golden Ticket event, which unfortunately Phil wasn't able to attend because you were doing other stuff, weren't you, Phil?
I'm still busy painting away. I mean, in hindsight, maybe I could have squeezed it in, but I don't think I would have liked that pressure on me mentally. I'm currently doing the bases of my Thunder Warriors, which I got quite substantially into it on the weekend, so I felt that block of time was actually really useful for me. So, yeah, sad to not be there and to have hung out with you and Richie, who also went, and miss out on that event, but needs must, basically.
Oh, 100%. And yeah, Richie was really great company throughout the weekend. Sean, thank you to Sean for lending me his Purple Sun. Both myself and Phil.
You've got one.
I do have one. Here's the thing, right? Everything was pushed quite late in terms of painting. I made the decision to migrate from the Cron Spine to Morbid Conjurations, the manifestation law that gives you access to the Purple Sun. I made that decision very late. And I don't know if you've built your own Purple Sun yet or not, Phil, but it is horrible. Have you built a Purple Sun?
No, I've seen the sprues because I've looked at them online when I was tempted to buy them, or I was looking at yours maybe one time and you were like, you can build it and paint it, but it's still mine. And I didn't like the sound of that offer. No, for my Purple Sun, I'm going to do, I mentioned it a while ago, the kind of a haunted tree with lots of hangman's skeletons off of it, and it's sort of like going to be a living endless spell, a living killer tree. Basically, is the plan that I always had for either the Purple Sun or the Cron Spine, but I end up having to just rush it and buy the Cron Spine, so it will become my Purple Sun as a concept. Basically, it's got a lot of very big mold line, or rather, more specifically, gap issues. It's quite notorious for it. Fortunately, it's quite easy to green stuff those gaps because it's all just kind of rough texture. But that's just more time than I had to give it. So I've done the base construction. I haven't begun the process of patching it up. So I'll definitely take a look at that. But yeah, my moment of desperation, I talked to Sean and got a lend of his, and served me well over the weekend. So thanks to Sean, and good to see him in the brief intervals that we did. He wasn't playing either, but yeah, it was me and Richie. We went up to Warhammer World on Friday in Nottingham, and took it upon ourselves to play 6 games of Warhammer Age of Sigmar. 4th edition. 6 games?
6.
Not the usual 5. Where did you squeeze in the 6th game?
We had it bolted on to the end of Sunday. So game 6 was actually optional, but essentially was used to determine the overall rankings. So essentially, your performance was dependent upon a number of variables. Again, I understand why they do it, and again, I'll start by saying I'm, again, people have heard me say this, but I'm a massive fan of the Warhammer World event team. I've been really lucky, and I'm sure you'll, echo this sentiment, as would Richie. We've been, super lucky to be where we are and to be able to find ourselves able to attend so many Warhammer World events and get to know the team. We've definitely built, not, super close relationships with the team there, but they know us, we know them. When you're there, you see Ed, Steve, others, and you know who they are, and it's lovely to catch up with them and get acquainted with all the recent happenings with them, etc. So yeah, like I really rate that team. I think they've been really great. I mean, I've been going to Warhammer World events consistently since around 2010. Phil, you started coming along around like 2012, 2013 time, I want to say.
Yeah, sounds about right. Yeah.
So, in that 11 to 14 year period, we've seen a lot of different events teams running, things in Warhammer World. And some of those individuals have been exceptional, really, really great. But I do really feel like the team today is definitely one of the best that they've had for consistencies. There's always stuff that I miss, but I think there's just changing sensibilities. It felt like 10, 14 years ago, I guess, the sort of mean age or the kind of average age of the attendees of Warhammer World events was more kind of mid-20s than mid-30s. Maybe that sort of audience has kind of migrated upwards with them, but
yeah. That's true. And I would say it used to always be the case back in those days, the tens. There was always a couple of quite young kids there that were either sort of basically teenagers, anywhere between 12 and 16, and sometimes even younger, like with their dads. But now that's very rare, I would say, with the exception of, obviously, I think Steve from the events team brings his kid along quite often. And actually, at the last event we did, there was two young chaps that were playing in the AOS event. Yeah, there were teenagers, and that was like a real rarity. Whereas before, it used to be quite a common sight.
Yeah, and I think as much as anything as well, obviously you have to filter everything for your own perspective. Obviously, back 10, 14 years ago, I and you, Phil, were younger, and I suppose gravitated towards different people in the room, and maybe it just was what it was. But yeah, it always felt a bit more. It always felt a little bit more kind of connected to a bigger weekend, as it were. Like back then, the Warhammer World events was kind of like the backdrop or the kind of excuse for going out for a big night out in Nottingham. Basically, it was always sort of like, we're doing this, but really we're here to enjoy.
No, it was Dan's having a big night out, and we're being dragged along with him.
Well, you see, because the friends I had that I frequented this with before you guys were much more into the party side of it.
Oh, I see. That's it.
Yeah. I used to have better friends, Phil. That's all I'm saying.
Shocking.
I know.
Shocking.
I mean, better in a subjective sense. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing. I think, so I miss things like the pub quiz. I miss things.
That was always quite good fun.
Yeah, and I think there was just an energy around it. Like, I felt like the team back then, maybe they were better resourced, but also I think as well, price is definitely a factor. Like, obviously, Warhammer World is expensive, travel is expensive, hotels are expensive.
Oh, so expensive.
Yeah, like this is the thing. I mean, if I'll always advocate that people should go and experience these things. I think if you're a fan of Warhammer, you should make it a objective to at least attend one event within Warhammer World, because it is such a significant venue for the overall kind of hobby. But I will acknowledge that, it's the money involved in it is a lot really now. And like, I noticed that this time really, where it's like, God, the tickets are like 70 quid for a single ticket. They used to do...
Wow.
Yeah. Well, they used to do free meals as well. I swear to God, they used to do lunch and dinner once upon a time.
No, so they only did dinners when it was the pub quiz, and they did a little kind of canteeny add-on, but that still cost you money, but it was still relatively cheap, I think.
Yeah.
Still cheaper than kind of just going to a restaurant or whatever, which is what we would normally do otherwise. But
that's the other thing.
The quality was always a bit questionable, I think, on those evening sort of Bugman's canteen meals.
Well, that's the thing as well, because it always sort of screws you up a bit as well, because basically, anyway, I'll just finish the money point. But yeah, basically 70 quid for that. It costs whatever it costs in travel if you're driving up and you're carpooling. sure, it's, slightly more affordable. And obviously, if you've got a more modern car with good gas mileage, as they say in America, or, petrol per gallon, I don't really know what the mileage, we'll just use that terminology. But then hotels, I mean, my hotel for this weekend was like 280 quid or something. And it's like, oh God. And then when you add in a few meals and other things and the ticket, you easily drop before you know it, you've spent like 400 or 500 quid. Now, obviously you can do it cheaper. You could do, Airbnbs. You could do maybe even just an old school B&B for yourself or what have you, or stay in a really dodgy part of town. There are ways and means. But yeah, I think that's definitely a factor with it as well, is that, not everyone can frivolously afford that kind of expense. But I do think it's worth it in the grand scheme of things. I think if you're into the hobby, it's a good time. I've forgotten what the potential place I was going to go a second ago, so we'll just move on, I suppose. What we were talking about a second ago that I said I was going to avoid talking about, I can't even remember now.
Just move on.
It's really going to annoy one of our listeners, though. They're going to go, "Damn, it was this. How are you this absent-minded? I've been too much AOS over the last 48 hours. My brain's fried."
I would say sort of like the price support's gotten sort of better in terms of what they give you. At one point, it was just like certificates that were on bits of paper, whereas now, you get like glass trophies or the old, weirdly not new, but sort of even older resin trophies, the big chunky ones that they sort of disappeared for a time and then they came back.
They've updated those. We have new trophies. I remember what I was talking about before. That was the team. I think the team is really great. And again, in the past, they had some really great teams that were well supported, financed, etc. But yeah, stuff's expensive now. And I think because it's expensive, maybe it doesn't draw the same kind of audience as it used to before, because I think it was slightly more accessible. But also, the team now is great. I've got a lot of time for them. I think they do a great job. So I think, before I talk about anything, I want to make sure that's understood, that I think Warhammer World is always worth going to and playing an event at. And I think the team do their utmost best to deliver the best experience. And shout out to the AOS designer, game developer fella, Matt, for putting in a shift as the head TO for the weekend.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've massively come to respect about the AOS team is their overall love and appreciation of the game. They don't just make it; they play it, and they're engaged with it, and they love it, and they are as much a part of the community as they are, the kind of lead of the community. And I think no one embodies that more than Matt, but I think the whole team's really great. And I think the fact that you can so frequently see him in attendance at events, and he's just overly, excited to communicate and share his passion and his work with people. So again, fair play to him. He did a great job. And I think, if there was one, particular highlight of the event, is the fact that you get, that kind of unfiltered access to people who are actually behind the scenes, building, developing, creating something that, theoretically you're very passionate about because you spent hundreds of hours painting miniatures and playing games and mastering your craft so as you could attend an event to try and prove yourself to be good at all this sort of stuff. So it's really lovely, is all I'm going to say. Well done, Matt. You're doing a great job, and you did a great job that weekend. So those are like my key kind of like happy places at the start, I think.
Brilliant.
But in terms of the sixth game, what that represented, basically, they squeezed that in at the end of Sunday. And personally, I think they can do better. I think they need to figure out a better way of managing that process. I think the sixth game and how it is rolled out needs to be dealt with better, because as it is, it becomes this optional extra and it becomes a bit muddled as a result.
it seems a bit odd because they don't. I would have assumed, because this is like a grand tournament style event, because it's a golden ticket event, that it would mostly be your win rates. So you win all 5 games. That would be the main decider. And I guess at a certain scale, yes, you would need another decider, either an extra game or, the person that scored the most victory points or whatever soft scores to contribute towards that. And not to give anything away, because you've obviously told me how you placed earlier on today, that there was a lot more soft scoring involved than I would have expected in terms of your favourite game and favourite army votes. And I would have thought that alone would have been enough between those 5 games to have worked out who would have been, the winner out of the people that went 5-0, unless they had a specifically best general spot that didn't include those scores.
Yeah, so, because this is the thing. What they've had to do is they've had to compromise, right? So, and as a result, the compromise is that they do something for everyone. So they've got a painting award segment, which is much more diluted than what it used to be, i.e. it's just best overall. So essentially 8 players are selected and their armies are selected and those are voted for and they get a painting award. Well done them. Then they do a best general. Now the best general is the best player as per the BCP Best Coast Pairings algorithm that they have dialed in. I'm not sure if it was using straight for schedule. I know the pairings were Swiss. They used various metrics to essentially assert points differentials. So essentially major wins, major losses, the number of battle tactics scored. Right. That all fed into BCP, and that kind of gave them their overall general score. And the people who were achieving the general score essentially were linked to those 6 games specifically. So essentially to crown an overall winner, a best general, so to crown a winner of the general award, they need to have 6 games just because of how the maths works out. If you've got if you've got about 80 people playing, you have to do 6 games to crown an overall winner. It just has to happen, just because of the mathematical algorithm of weaning people down. But then in addition to that, they have best overall, and best overall effectively only took into consideration the first 5 games, and that was what all of your hobby scores were based on.
Right, okay.
But I think, here's the thing, to me, I think realistically, I think the way that they should do it, in my humble opinion, is that they should come up with another system to try and essentially, segregate or separate that last game and ultimately. But in fact, scratch all that. I just think they just need to pick one thing and just stick to it. I understand that what they're trying to do is be all things to all people, but it just doesn't. It just becomes really convoluted, and I think,
I don't mind it being a cutthroat grand tournament style event, because in the past that's what they were sort of advertised as, and that's not the type of people that they necessarily draw to, because I think the vast majority of even competent and good players are still kind of relatively casual in the grand scheme of things. There's only probably, a much smaller percentage that are like the people that are trying to get an ITC score and rank and compete on that level. But there'll always be people that are good enough to be like, okay, cool, I want to win and try and get the golden ticket. And they're like absolutely fine tune their lists to the nth degree. Whereas I think most people sort of, a bit like me, where they're like competent enough, they've got an okay list and they're just, make do with what they've got. They're not going to go out of their way and buy loads of new stuff just because it's the meta or whatever. So yeah, if it's just advertised as a grand tournament event, I don't mind it being super competitive and not really leaning into that kind of hobby score stuff. I think always have a painting event. That's always nice regardless. But you just need to also have like a much more non-competitive event as well, where it's, the Throne of Skulls brand, which weirdly used to be the competitive events, but now more for casual gamers. As long as you've got both of those two events, I think that's fine. So it's, interesting they try to kind of compromise. And, maybe that will work eventually, but maybe doing 6 games is a bit much for a lot of people.
Yeah, and here's the thing, right? The thing that kind of weirds me out about it as well is that Warhammer World criteria, that Warhammer official events criteria, as in owned, operated, done by Games Workshop Warhammer, is completely at odds with how it happens at all the other independent events that are ran in collaboration with Warhammer that ignore that entire side of things. So I can only speak from a Warhammer 40,000 perspective. Those are the events that I've TO'd and been involved with. When we at Beachhead have a golden ticket to award, we're not creating a separate tracker for that golden ticket. We're not going, oh, there's the actual person who won all their games and then the geezer that everyone likes, right? Like that doesn't happen. It's literally the person who wins all their games gets it. That's it.
Yeah. I mean, it only makes sense if the golden ticket final also has a best overall and a best general category. Because if it's just a best general, then the people that kind of get in at the best overall might be steamrolled. I mean, I'm sure they're still quite good players, but maybe if they're not as competitive as, say, the more competitive players. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to say for sure, but I would probably lean into your assertion. And I think I think the thing that's sort of weird always about best overall is it creates all this strange weirdness around the whole kind of popularity contest that goes into it, and everything that kind of happens in that space. And I think for me personally, I do understand why Games Workshop have kind of settled on this system. But as you say, it confuses me that Warhammer World, they do it completely at odds with how every other UK event is ran, which is basically all the other UK events that are golden ticketed are basically the best player gets the golden ticket, i.e. the best general. Whereas at Warhammer World, so you're going to have these situations where there's maybe, 2 or 3 players in attendance at the World Finals who got there because they embody a number of appealing attributes that make people want to give them votes for favourite game, and they have a nicely painted army, which is no bad thing, right? Because obviously it's good to have nice painted armies and the rest of it. But it is odd because it's sort of like it's almost like basically what you've done is you ran a lottery, as it were. It's like a strange Miss Universe contest going on alongside a tournament.
Right. Yeah. Do you want to hear something that's really interesting? Because I watched an interview with Jervis Johnson, who created effectively the first kind of grand tournament in the UK, and his format involved your best general sort of scoring, like how you actually did the games, your sort of favourite army. Like he had a sportsmanship score, basically. He had a painting score, but he also had a lore score, and there was basically like a quiz, which I guess is maybe where the pub quiz concept came from Warhammer World. So there was you're being tested on sort of all the facets of the hobbyist. So it was which included some lore knowledge, which I thought was really interesting. I mean, I think that's still quite an interesting format, which is more, as you say, a best overall, like an all-round hobbyist championship versus just purely competitive, which is just, being able to smash someone up.
Yeah, I just think as well, I just think it would have just been, I do genuinely think that I understand why they do it, but I think I think what they're doing here is trying to solve or answer a question no one's asking. Because I don't think people who sign up to these events think that they're going to anything other than a matched play event, like to a that I don't think.
True. Yeah. My only counter to that might be that they're just trying to standardize all of their events, regardless of whether they're competitive or not. And they're just going to be like, cool, every event we're going to have a best general and a best overall to, as you say, to sort of cater to everyone.
Yeah.
But it feels like they don't necessarily need to do that if they're doing specific, like, narrative, competitive, casual events, because then people can sort of self-select into the ones that they want to go to.
Yeah, and I think that's it. It's, as I say, it's just very interesting. And here's the thing, right? I think the same in reverse as well, in so much as the Throne of Skull events, which are intended to be more casual gaming events that are celebration of hobby and people coming together to play games, but ultimately it's more about the kind of collective enjoyment of a weekend away playing games together with like-minded people. I think that's important as well, but I think that needs to be protected and not also reward best generals in those situations, because I think that muddies the water.
I don't think they did, actually, or did they?
They have done, yeah. So they have made a habit of giving awards out to the best general. Again, they're inconsistent with it. They change in their methodology from event to event, but they have done it, and I think that's as out of place there as I think Throne of Skulls style overall scoring is out of place here. I think ultimately there's a reason, there are many different genres and tastes that people have, and people go to specific events to cater to those specific tastes. And I think ultimately, I don't think we need to be muddying the water because it just creates this this strangeness to it, because basically the guy who won the golden ticket via best overall, or rather, by best overall, sort of was surprised that they did it because they themselves only won 3 games, right? So they weren't thinking to themselves, "Oh, that'll be me." They're like, they sort of call him out, and I think on the I think on the overall rankings, I think on the actual tournament rankings, I think they finished 23rd on the actual main tournament rankings, but yet somehow came third in the overall rankings because of hobby scores, and they were like, "What? It's okay."
They're kind of wildly weighted. In a way, you almost want it to be, okay, out of the top 5, who had the best hobby scores, maybe, or something like that. I mean, I think every time we've been to one of those events, we've always sort of relatively complained to some degree about the hobby scores as being sort of really sort of inaccurate or just so swingy. And but at the same time, I acknowledge that they should be there and that they should have an effect on your score to an extent, but I was generally surprised about how much it affected, like, yours and Richard's scores at what should be a tournament. So yeah, maybe they just need to be dialed back a bit, at least for these events.
Yeah. I mean, and also to put it in context, the guy who won overall, the current golden ticket winning, or rather 2023 Golden Grand Tournament Age of Sigmar winning player, Nicholas, who came over from France, they, in terms of overall ranking, right, just to put it in context, where is he? So he won all 6 games and came first in generals. Mm-hmm. And in his overall ranking, he came... Hang on. Why can I not find him on here? Oh, he came 31st.
Wow. Not popular.
But, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, he came 31st. His hobby score was 3. Someone voted for either him being a good opponent or for having a beautiful army.
But here's the thing. If you're winning every single one of your games, I do think it's generally quite hard to then get favourite army votes or favourite game votes, because that's just down to your opponent having a good time. And if you're smashing up all your opponents, I don't think they're going to have the best of times.
Well,
so it makes it a lot harder for them to score those favourite game votes. They could have a gorgeous army though, which gives them the favourite favourite army votes.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, I played Nicholas. I won't tell you how the game went, but I played Nicholas. I'll tell you how the game went in a moment, but I played Nicholas, and I didn't give him a favourite game vote. It's not that I didn't enjoy my game with him. I actually really enjoyed my game with him, but I enjoyed my games with two other people more, and he had probably one of the most beautiful armies that I played against. But he admitted and was very open, and I respect him for it because ultimately it's the right thing to do. And I do the same when I use Joe's stuff, other than if Joe's in attendance and is likely to get something out of it. But like basically, he was open about the fact he didn't paint his own army. So although I did think it was a really beautiful army, it's not his. So I was like, well, I would have given him best painted, but I know he didn't do it. So I'm like, well.
Yeah, and that actually brings up an interesting point about the hobby score, because the hobby score is for favourite army, but there's no stipulation on whether you painted it or not yourself, so you can buy yourself those favourite army votes. However, getting into the cabinet for the best army overall, you specifically have to tell them that you didn't paint it. Because obviously you didn't paint it. You can't, well, I mean, I guess you could say you just painted it yourself when you didn't, but I mean, you're not meant to, and I wouldn't obviously advise that. So yeah, that bit's sort of gatekept by actual hobbyists, and I think that's good. But you're right, there's no way to, because it's just done on an honesty system. And that would be interesting actually if they did, you can only get that hobby score if you painted it yourself. So people, great, you can bring along a painted army that you bought, but you've got to sort of say that, and you miss out on that scoring, because then you could argue it penalizes them, but it also encourages people to be a hobbyist and actually build and paint their own armies. And if they don't want to do that, that's great, but you're going to lose out in casual events. Yeah,
I think that's the thing. I think ultimately it's just really interesting, the swing, isn't it? Because as I say, Nicholas, first place in generals, 31st place overall, which to me demonstrates a very meaningful problem with the overall system, because the delta between winning all your games and coming first and your overall performance being so vast, it definitely exposes a weirdness to it. But ultimately, the way they get around that is they do both. But as I say, personally to me, I think for the golden ticket, they should just do one. That's all I keep coming back to. I think that's the right decision, but there you go.
Fair enough. So do you want to go through your list?
I did have another grumble, and this isn't, I don't know. I'm happy to be told I'm wrong about this, and I don't necessarily entirely agree with myself when I say it, but there is a big part of me that struggles with a golden ticket event that is intended to be a qualifying event for a large finals, and that event is frequented, attended by people who already qualified for the finals. Because ultimately, 3 of the top 4 players in the generals performance all had won golden tickets already.
Interesting. I mean, I think... Oh, go on.
And there is an additional additive to this. And the individual who won best overall is a Games Workshop member of staff who works on the design team of Age of Sigmar.
Oh, cheat, can't have that.
So, there's 2 different conversations here, right? Because here's the thing. James, who won best overall, only won 4 games, which is a great accomplishment, to be fair. It's a really good achievement. But where he basically won out is he got a near perfect hobby score. So he got 27 out of 30 points in hobby score. So basically, he had everyone eating out of his hand because I talked to him as well. One of the nicest human beings you could encounter, an absolutely, incredible guy, passionate about the hobby, clearly able to paint a beautiful looking army, incredibly fun to play against, or at least that was, evident from seeing people playing against him. Just seemed like a really, really, really all-round hobby hero, but also is one of the leading developers on Age of Sigmar, so has a kind of aura around him, which gives him...
I guess you could say you can't tell for sure how many of those favourite game votes are somewhat biased by the fact that he works for Games Workshop. Chances are maybe none, but you can't discount it as a possibility because I think people do go, not to say people are celebrities, but in this world, you can be a sort of a mini celeb in your own right for, being on a YouTube channel or being on being part of Games Workshop somewhere in a department that people might be like, oh, cool, well, that's really great. But, chances are he's just a lovely human being. And as you said, rightfully got all of those in there on his own merit. Well, yeah, I think you could argue that maybe he shouldn't get a golden ticket purely because he's a Games Workshop employee, or in and of its own right. And because I don't know, I've always had that sort of grumble about heavy metal artists winning the Army Painting Award. And I'm like, you're already in the heavy metal team. You don't need to take an award off of a pleb in the streets like us mere mortals that are coming along to try and win the trophy once a year at something. And it's like, they've got it instead.
I mean, for context, Eddie on the community team also played in this tournament. Eddie won 3.5 games, but hobby score-wise for Eddie only got 6, which means 2 people voted for him in hobby score, which is wild because he had one of the most gorgeous-looking Cruel Boys armies I've ever seen. So, it was a gorgeous army. So it can't just be it's the Games Workshop rub, if you will. It's definitely James and his personality and his approach. Because if it were just Games Workshop and the gravitas, the status, because Eddie is a prolific face or has been a prolific contributor to Warhammer community, he should be a relatively revered character, but has performed nowhere near as successful as James in terms of scores.
Well, I mean, Matt was, the lead dev was at my event that I'd gone to that we talked about previously, and I didn't check where he landed on his scores or what his hobby scores were, but it certainly wasn't best overall. So that almost goes to show that it is just was it James's natural charisma.
And I think there's a thing, to be clear as well, James didn't win a golden ticket. He couldn't win a golden ticket because he's probably attending the event in an official work capacity.
Oh, okay. So he wasn't actually getting it. Okay. I think that's fair, I think.
Yeah, so in actual fact, he was essentially a 4th member of the tournament, already with a golden ticket, basically. So, yeah, so again, I think for me, I think at the end of the day, I don't think there's any shame and any harm in James winning best overall because he clearly was the best overall because everyone loved playing him. He brought a lot of fun and enthusiasm to the room and to the games. So I've got no issue with that. I think my concern is, and the thing that I struggle with is when people have already qualified and earned their spot, it feels to me like there's a certain amount of gatekeeping there where they are keeping other people out because...
yeah, true. And also just generally getting more practice in than maybe other people would get a chance to.
Which I can't begrudge them for. And this is why I'm torn, because at the end of the day, if Nicholas wants to come over from Paris and play Age of Sigmar at Warhammer World in a tournament setting, he can't stop being who he is, and he can't stop being as good as he is at the game, unless he just purposely sabotages himself. But he's got a reputation. He's a great player. He won't get any enjoyment out of not bringing the heat, right? He's going to play to win. And because he's going to play to win, he's probably going to win because he has a track record of winning. And that's fine, right? I wouldn't want to play against Nicholas. I did play against Nicholas, but I wouldn't want to play against Nicholas and feel like I was getting a charity, right? I wouldn't want to play him and feel like a win or loss was not earned, because ultimately I want the best version of whoever I play in a tournament of Warhammer. That's what I'm looking for. So, but my question is does it create scenarios where it does skew situations? Because, I mean, no one's going to be shocked by this, so spoilers for me talking about it later. I lost to Nicholas. What a shocker, right? I played arguably one of the best players in the world, and I played them in Game 4, and I lost, right?
But what you're saying is if he wasn't there, you might have won your game. Maybe if you had, not that I know, if you had, say, won all your games, you could have got a golden ticket.
I could have done, and again, I mean, at the end of the day, if I had wheels, I'd be a bicycle, right? Like it's a pointless hypothetical. But what I'm saying is what is undeniable is that that I lost to someone who already had a gold ticket or had secured the spot. Yeah. And what I will say is with Games Workshop or Warhammer World or Warhammer Events tournament system, losses are mad punishing. Like literally the way Games Workshop tournament systems are organised, certainly within the match play event side of things, is essentially if you win a bunch of games and you basically are doing well, you're swimming with the sharks in the top tables. But as soon as the loss happens, and especially on where it happens in the pecking order or the order of events, you can fall quite far. We saw it with Richie a few years ago in Warhammer 40,000, where he went 4-0 and was basically, joint first by the end of 4 games. But in game 5, he lost, and he went from being in essentially second place to finishing, I want to say, like 9th or 11th or 12th or even like 13th. The irony being that myself and Adam played Richie at that same tournament, and Richie beat both of us. Richie beat me with my Imperial Knights. He beat Adam with his Custodes. And Adam finished second, maybe third overall. And Richie, the guy that beat me and Adam, was behind me and Adam in the rankings. And it was like, it just feels rough when you lose those games.
Yeah, it's sort of odd that the people in the final, and I can say this is because in the last event that I did, I'd won all my games except the very last one. So I was like in the final with the Giants player. And it's like, as you say, when you lose that game, you don't come second like you would in, if it was like a football series, a football tournament or something like that. And you end up, as you say, it's everyone's scores combined. So you end up, 10th or wherever it might be down the rankings, which does feel quite punishing for someone that's got the win path of winning all their games and then losing out at the very end. So I assume they don't ever factor in win path into their scores because I don't know if it's too difficult or whatever.
But it's not difficult though. That's the thing. It's just an option on. So again, here's the thing. Like in events that I've been involved in, it's very easy to segregate like the segmentation, so as you know that the person, the 2 people or the 4 people who have gone 2-0 or 4-0 in going into the 5th game, they're all segregated into a section. So the winner will be one of them, but then they're all battling for 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. They're just bracketed, or they're battling for 1st and 2nd. You just that. Yeah,
that feels quite appropriate. But I guess because they're also then including soft scores that can wildly swing your points.
They are in best overall, but they're not doing that in best general.
Oh right, no, you're right. Yeah, no, fair enough. Interesting.
And this is the thing, right? Because here's the thing: my loss to Nicholas, like your loss to the Giants player, the Sons of Behemoth player, the Gargants. You know that. For you, I mean, where did you finish in that event?
I can't remember. It probably, can't remember.
Probably 2 digits, right?
Yeah, I would have thought so. Hold on, I'll see if I can find it while we're chatting. But probably,
yeah, it's fine. I mean, but the point is that that's my thing with it. It's like because, again, not to kind of delegitimize anyone's performance and not to sort of self-aggrandize myself. But just to sort of say, it does feel like one of those things that you play hard to get to where you're at, but then very little is sort of made of the effort that went in to get you to where you were. And that kind of accomplishment is essentially immediately eroded. And to lose out to someone who doesn't even need the win just feels like a bit harsh. And then you're like, oh, okay. And that's it really, because then at the end you're kind of looking at the overall rankings and thinking to yourself, oh, that seems a bit crazy because it doesn't feel representative of what that person, you, Richie, myself in this instance, have kind of gone through. So yeah, I mean, I could talk through my games, and then maybe that will give everyone a bit more context to what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I was going to say, I found where my score was. I actually placed 3rd in Best Coast Bearings.
But they will have used best overall, wouldn't they?
No, Best Coast Pairings didn't include the overall bits. It was just the win rating, because 2 people had won all 5 games. And then I then came 3rd. There was a bunch of other people that had won 4 games, but I think I probably had the best victory points because I pretty much maxed out all my victory points except for the very last game. So I think maybe that's the thing that pipped me to that other place, because I think it's wins and then victory points. I assume how Best Coast Pairings works for that event. That's the screenshot I've said that I've got.
There you go. But yeah, let me go through the pairings and talk through the games. So game 1 was against Adam. I played Adam before at the narrative campaign event we did a few months ago with Tim, yourself, Tommy, Richie, Danvers. Good time. Sean, of course. Others were included, Ed, etc. Good times. But I played Adam actually twice at that event. He is from Bristol or Bath. Oh, God. One or the other. Mm-hmm. They feel relatively interchangeable. Apologies to people from Bristol and Bath for being so flippant about your place of origin. I think it's Bath. Really fun kind of club kind of branding, though. They have these like black T-shirts with like pink pig branding on them. I've been lucky enough to get a couple of dice off of Adam. They got these really nice pink dice. I'm actually going to tap him up for buying a whole set of them because I really love them for my Iron Jaws. Adam's a top bloke. Really, really like him. We spent a good long while chatting to each other across the tabletop in the games of Age of Sigmar now. I mean, we're 3 games deep. That's like 9 hours of forced conversation with someone.
You're practically married.
Practically married. Well, that's the thing, as I say many times, it's weird, isn't it, in modern the modern world, how often do you actually share, that many hours of conversation with even some of your closer acquaintances? Really, it feels more and more that it's rarer and rarer. So anyway, yeah. So Adam's a great guy. He plays Stormcast Eternals, had a really interesting list. I should actually also as well really explain what my list is. So allow me to kind of start off with that. So I took what the internet will tell you, and they're probably right, to be fair, is one of the worst Age of Sigmar lists you could use, which is Iron Jaws. Iron Jaws are not viewed favourably by the internet. They're overcosted, is what they say, Phil. They're overcosted. And they're not wrong, to be fair. They are overcosted. Hopefully, if there is to be a balance update soon, we'll see a reduction in cost for a number of things, and we'll get a few more options. When you look at just how powerful the elves are at the moment, specifically the Realm Lords, you really start to appreciate just how limited and one-dimensional Iron Jaws are when put up against things like Nighthorn and specifically Realm Lords, Illuminef Realm Lords, very, very strong. But my army was 4 drops. It was a Weird Fist army. So Weird Fist is every infantry model that is wholly within 12 of, or rather unit, that is wholly within 12 of either a wizard or a priest, gains a 6-up ward save, which is really, really cool. The General's Regiment consisted of a Mega Boss on foot. He had the Trophy Skulls, which essentially increased his control score from 2, Phil, to, what do you reckon?
To 3.
No, 12.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
You could take on giants with that.
Yeah, it's very, very good, that is. It's very, very good. And he was joined by his reinforced units of brutes with obviously 2 gore choppers. So that was my General's Regiment. That's how that went. Then
So did you just have 2 units in that one?
Yes, so I had my General and my reinforced unit.
Oh, you metagamed it.
Oh, yeah, well, you need everything you can get if you're going to be playing Iron Jaws, mate. Trust me.
Fair enough.
Regiment 1, or Regiment 2 technically, but 1 because it's not the General's Regiment, was War Chanter, and the War Chanter had an eye for to fight, which essentially allows you to redeploy a minimum of 4 inches. Super useful when people are trying to get the jump on you. As an Iron Jaws player, you really don't want to have to be put into fights that people want to fight you in. You want to force the fights that people don't want. So having the ability to redeploy a minimum of 4 inches is super powerful, because basically when stuff comes near you and stays, outside of 9 inches of you, you use that ability and then you're unchargeable, which is really useful.
Oh, handy.
Indeed. And he, shock horror, was also joined by a unit of reinforced brutes with 2 gore choppers.
Okay.
Then we had a Weird Knob Shaman and a unit of Hard Boys. So they're pretty good. And then we had another Weird Knob Shaman, a unit of 3 Gore Grunters, and 1 more Grunter Gorgus. And that was precisely 2,000 points. And I was using the manifestation law of Morbid Conjuration.
Oh, but out of those endless spells, how many did you actually have?
In terms of owned and...
Yeah, did you use just the Purple Sun, or did you have others that you were also using?
I was majoritively using the Shackles for both move blocking and, mortal wounds and slowing down my opponent, putting them on my speed. Because the Shackles are really good because you can deploy them within, any distance, because they don't have a move characteristic. So you basically put them down and then you do D3 mortal wounds and then reduce the movement as well.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's quite cool.
Which is super useful. Purple Sun I used relatively frequently as well because I'm quite low AP, or rather, rend. So having the Purple Sun really helps boost my rend. And the Purple Sun is way less punishing now that it doesn't affect you. It used to be that the Purple Sun used to be hilarious because it used to affect you and your enemy.
Oh, does it not anymore?
No, it only affects your enemy.
That's a shame, because that was like the one perk of taking it with Nighthaunt was obviously you're not affected by rend, so it was like, oh yes, all the benefits.
Well, you guys have got plenty of other perks these days, mate.
Well,
so
sounds
don't worry
like
too
it.
much about it. Yeah.
Fair enough.
And then the bomb I used every now and again. The bomb was the lowest of my priorities. It tended to go that I'd use Gravetide, Shackles, Sun, Gravetide. But it was rare that I get them all out. There was only one game where I had more than two, endless spells on the board at any one time. The rest of the time, I usually would get the Shackles out. They then die, then I do them again. So I used to tend to just do the Shackles a lot rather than anything else.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which, by the way, pro tip that I learned through playing, really, really good trick with the Shackles. Do the Shackles, and then once you've done the Shackles in the following turn or in your enemy's turn, if you've got the CP, banish them, because you can banish your own stuff.
What's the benefit of banishing them other than, is it because they're stationary, so you want to resummon them?
You banish them and then you summon them again.
Right, okay. I don't think you can banish them in your opponent's turn.
Oh, you might not be able to do it in your opponent's turn.
Because I think when you pay the CP, that's purely for casting a spell.
Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. But either way, you can banish them and then resummon them and stuff. I saw many techlesses doing it all the time, and I was like, ooh, didn't think about that. I mean, obviously,
I didn't know if you could banish your own, but it does make sense that you could, especially if it's stationary.
Yeah. Well, some of the best players in the world were doing that frequently.
Well, so I guess you can. No.
Well, indeed. That or they're all cheats.
Could be possible.
Could be possible. Anyway, so that was how that went. And my opponent was running Stormcast, and they were basically... So Adam was running Stormcast, and they were effectively all built around the long strike crossbows, which are a wild unit, Phil. They just basically teleport and move all over the place, shoot like a ridiculous amount. It is utterly wild to me that the General's Regiment of +1 to hit, +1 to wound stacks with ranged units. I feel like, much like with early Cities of Sigmar, we need to get rid of that buff on ranged units because there are some terrifying uses for that General's Regiment.
Yeah, I mean, I've considered getting some crossbow ghosts and making it reinforced and doing that basically, because especially with ranged units for a CP, you can shoot in your opponent's turn.
Yeah,
which is madly efficient, I think.
Yeah, well, that's it. Especially if you're negating the negative to hits by the general's benefit, and it's very good. But so that was actually quite a terrifying matchup for me to kick things off because I essentially needed to apply pressure to Adam's Stormcast to essentially get him to make a movement mistake that I was then able to exploit with combat. I managed to track down and kill the kind of massive threatening range unit in my turn 2, which was after 2 turns of his. And I was able to, through use of Mighty Destroyers and other things, catch him and then just chop him up from there. Because the great thing about that unit is it is incredibly potent, but once you catch it, it does sort of fold like paper. Or as papery as Stormcast Eternals can be.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So finished that game with a win. So that was 38 to 20. So it went really well for me that game. So, off to a positive start, feeling good about things. And then we go into game 2. So in game 2, I played against Toby, who was also running Stormcast. Toby was a really... Yeah. This was a very different list, though. This was the Dragon Stormcast list.
Classic. Yeah,
very popular list back in 3rd Ed. To be honest, it was a very popular list. Now, Toby had driven up from Essex in the morning, so he'd been up since like 4:30. And I think that really played with him in this game because essentially he asked me a bunch of questions at the start of the game. I have 4 drops. He has like 3. So he knows he's got control over who goes first and second. And he basically, even after me explaining to him that this is how the army kind of works. And I know I'm 4 drops, so I've built strategies around going first. But ultimately, in this, I said in this matchup, I would probably say to you that you should let me go first and see what I do and play around it. No, I said that to him. I said, you should let me go first and play around it. And for whatever reason, he either thought I was lying to him or he thought I was trying to bait him.
I think most people would think that, Dan.
I just been nice to him. I said to him, look, my threat range is this. I can teleport into your ranks. Like, I can do it, but I need to roll a 9 to get in, unless I call the Ardjaws War, which, I said to him, I probably would do if I went first, but that's basically my only option. So I essentially need to roll a 7 on 2d6, assuming I don't get the place of power off. You then need to not shut that down. I then need to be deployed, and then I need to roll a 9, admittedly with a reroll, to get into you. And then on top of that, to be effective when I get in, I need to roll a 2+ with this guy. I need to roll a 4+ with this guy. These are all these things that need to happen for that to work. But all that being considered, I still wouldn't recommend you going first.
Right, okay.
And he went first. And he went, I'm going to go seize the center. And he moved a bunch of dragons into the center. And then I effortlessly moved 2 units of brutes into a bunch of dragons and killed almost all of them in a turn.
Ooh.
And it was mate, and he just literally looked at me like, oh God, I've absolutely mucked this up, haven't I? I was like, yeah, I did try to tell you. Like, this wasn't the play.
Was he like, you double bluffed me, Dan?
No, I didn't. Dude, honestly, all I was trying to do was help him out because here's the thing, right? The advantage I had over most people I played and beat is they have no idea what Ardjaws do. Like and I try and explain it to them, but I also don't over-explain because I don't want to.
It's much to explain. It's like I go forward and smash. Right.
Yeah, exactly, that's the thing. But I don't think they realise how hard it hits.
Okay, yeah.
Because they look at it and go, well, it's a unit of 10 geezers with axes. I'm a big dragon. What have I got to worry about?
True.
It turns out when I've got +1 damage, when I've got +2 attack, when I've got exploding 6s, when I've got double hits on 6s, when I'm, it's ridiculous. It's like literally like when I've got a purple sun in play, reducing the rend by an additional 1.
Ooh, God, that is, those units, whenever you've explained that combo to me, does sound completely busted, like the amount of attacks that he put out.
Yeah, but the delivery mechanism is terrible, right? Compared to some of the other armies like Nighthawk that could just go everywhere. Their movement is very slow. So, that's basically how the game went. Essentially, he went first, seized the center. I ran into him, near killed everything, and then I doubled him. I did a double turn and then killed everything. And that was the game. Yeah, jeez. I mean, admittedly, that's not true. He still had Cryptborn, the Lord Relictor on Dragon.
Oh, the new one. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So he had that guy still in play.
I mean, if that's all that's left in the army, it's not a lot.
Yeah, no, I basically killed Krondus. I killed Krondus and a bunch of Drake Knights, basically. Drake Knight Guard, Lancers, whatever they are. All of that was gone in like a turn, 2 turns, basically.
Wow.
It was a bloodbath, mate. I literally, I smashed him. So by the end of it, I got 40 points. He got 10.
Wow.
And the 10 was his opening turn where he got objectives, sat in the middle. Right.
Yeah.
And he went, I got 10 points. And then I went, cool, and now you're dead.
That's it. I mean, that happens sometimes.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I couldn't score because I killed everything so quickly. I couldn't score very much in terms of battle tactics.
Right. Yeah. That is the problem, I guess.
Yeah. So I ended up only getting 40 for that one. But yeah.
Too efficient.
Mate, Toby was a great guy, though, and I feel bad for him because ultimately he deserved better. But I think he did okay for the rest of the event. I think it was a bit of a wake-up call for him in terms of, some of the... He knew it himself. And it was nice, though, because it gave us a bit of a break, and it was good. And actually, funnily enough, the guy who played in Game 3, a Nighthawk player, Phil, was a friend of Toby's called Matt. Really nice dude, beautifully painted Nighthawk army. Matt, really, really, really lovely fella. I'll tell you the list, Phil, because I know you're interested. He had the spell law, the manifestation law of Chthonic sorceries, which I think is the Nighthawk specific one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Do you never use Chthonic sorceries? It's got like a scythe that isn't.
The scythe one that's like a Grim Reaper scythe. That's the Nighthawk one.
Yeah. So in their General's Regiment, they had Lady Alinda, Black Coach, Dreadblade Harrows, Dread Scythe Harridans Reinforced, and Dread Scythe Harridans on their own.
Oh, okay. Yeah, pretty good.
That was their General's Regiment. Then they had, as a regiment, Guardian of the Souls with Ruler of the Spectral Hosts.
I think that's where you can resurrect loads of models once per game.
Yes, that was right.
Yeah, or one unit maybe. Yeah, unit.
And then 3 units of Craven Throne Guard.
Oh yeah, the shooty boys. Yeah. I remember seeing a photo and going, "Oh wow, he's got loads of them, but not a single reinforced unit of them." It seemed like they were just 3 units of 10.
Well, the intention behind them is apparently that he goes around shooting off little shots. And then when he gets a wound on you, some other stuff.
Oh, right, yeah. So the Harridans, when they charge in, I think they get an extra +1 to wound.
That's right,
if you've already taken a wound off them that turn. Okay, so if he's got one of those per Harridan unit, that would sort of make sense, I guess. Okay.
Yeah. And then Lord Executioner with Light Shard of the Harvest Moon.
That's the other once per game one, which I think gives you +1 attack once per game within an aura. I think it's that one.
And then a couple of units of Banshees, and that was his 2,000 points.
Ooh,
really, really great guy. And, definitely a tough matchup. Nighthorn really, really, really enjoy dancing around and duffing up Iron Jaws. But here's the thing. I spend a lot of time talking to you about this stuff, so I know the army quite well, but I've also been fortunate enough that I've played a couple of playtest games with a nice... one of them was with a nice lad from down the club, Ash, who was kind enough to bring a Nighthawk army tailor-made to smash me up, and did so fantastically. So I'd spent a lot of time understanding the matchup.
Right.
And again, dined out on the fact that Matt clearly wasn't completely aware of how punishing brutes could be. So I used a few of my kind of more mobile units sacrificially, drew him in, and then just counterpunched him and essentially seized the middle ground and ultimately just dominated from there. So final score on that one was 48 to me, 32 to the Nighthawk.
I mean, that's still a pretty good score for Nighthawk, I would say.
Oh, he was. The thing is the way you have to play that matchup, you have to respect them and you have to give them space, but you have to exploit the mistakes. And the only mistake that I was able to exploit, which ended up crippling him, was that he overinvested resources in. I know with Nighthawk players what they're looking to do. They're looking to stack buffs, right? So it's like, it's not enough that you just go, one unit's going in. They go, here's one unit, then there's a character, then there's a thing. Because they feel most comfortable when all 3 debuffs are happening in succession.
Yeah.
So you essentially feed them something that looks tasty. And to be fair, it probably is. And then you do it in such a way as you're going to use that as a catapult to get stuck into that and cause it problems. Because, once that Nighthawk army gets charged, it doesn't enjoy not doing the charges.
Oh, yeah, completely.
And I will say this as well. I think one of the mistakes that Matt made, and I didn't get a chance to talk to him about this, I think one of the biggest mistakes he made was he was using the ability to leave combat and charge back in.
Oh, yeah.
And do all that stuff. He left combat with one of my Maw Grunter, and because he left combat with my Maw Grunter and then recharge it, I basically used my redeploy and ran far enough away that he failed the charge. Right?
Oh, so because he fell back, you could then redeploy before he charged.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, the ironic thing, though, is if you're just going to charge back in to the same unit, you don't even need to leave combat because you can just charge. I mean, I, out of habit, still do it sometimes, and often I do it because I'm like, I might try and position myself in a way where I don't need to charge that unit. I could charge a different unit instead. And that's what it's best used for when you sort of jump over a unit to get to another unit behind or something like that. But if you are just trying to do it to get the buff off of whatever they have for charging, you don't actually need to fall back. You can just make the charge. So yeah, interesting.
100% that. And that's what, because basically the more Grunter was out on its own, there was a big block of brutes and our boys sort of towards the middle right. The more Grunter was slightly more out on the right, having just killed Lady Alinda, and then he obviously I think it was the Executioner was in combat with it, and he left it, and then the more Grunter went back into the pack, so moved towards. As it was, he failed the charge, but had he made the charge, I had 2 CP ready to countercharge him with other units that were there.
Right,
so it was because I was able to draw him back towards my stuff. So it was that thing where, that was the thing I should have said to him after the fact, but it didn't really occur to me until I was thinking about it afterwards. I was like, oh, you should have just charged me in combat and got the buff that way. But yeah, that was a great game and a really great way to finish it. I mean, Matt, sincerely, great player, really good guy, had a great time playing against him, gave him one of my favourite game votes, thought he was a top guy, had a beautiful army. So yeah, that was day one. 3 wins, no losses, Phil.
Ooh, riding high.
And then we get to game 4 where I play against Nicholas. Spoilers, I lose this one. So Nicholas is running Slaves to Darkness. It's a really interesting list. So basically, Nicholas's list is Archeon the Everchosen, who is really super powerful. He's an incredible buff piece. But also just an incredible kind of character in his own right. He was joined by his General's Regiment of Chaos Furies, Dark Oath Fell Riders, so 2 units of Dark Oath Fell Riders with the broadswords, and a unit of Raptorix, whatever they're called. They're basically like the weird turkey
winged,
yes.
Flying creatures.
Yeah, so what he was doing, he was using his General's Regiment to use the Bodyguard ability, where if Archeon is wholly within 6 of, or rather, if Archeon's Bodyguard units are wholly within 6 of Archeon, i.e. in this instance in this instance it was the Raptorix, Archeon is -1 to attacks, or rather, people targeting Archeon are -1 to attack, which is massive.
Is it -1 to hit or -1 attack?
Attack.
Right, okay. Ooh, yeah, that can be very good. Yeah,
really good. Really increases his survivability. Just adds a lot of flavour to it. It was a really interesting list. He had another regiment, which was a Chaos Sorcerer Lord with a Mark of Zinch, the Infernal Puppet, and Radiance of Glory. So the Infernal Puppet is you basically fling it onto a wizard, and they take mortal wounds every time they cast spells. So if you're up against Teclis, really shuts him down because you just go, you get Infernal Puppeted, mate. And it's like, oh, God, don't really want to be doing all these spells anymore. And Radiant Glory is basically an aura heal for all Chaos units within a 12 or even 18-inch radius. It's very powerful. And then a massive block of 10, so a reinforced unit of Khorne Chaos Chosen, which hit like a truck with another truck on top of it. It's literally terrifying. So, yeah, basically that list, super good. Now, I've played Richie a lot, and I've played Slaves to Darkness a lot. So I know this matchup really well. And to my defense, I'm not sure what Nicholas himself would say about this, but to my defense, I think I played it as well as I could. And I sincerely believe that had I had a stronger turn 2, so that's me having had essentially the 4th turn of the game, my turn 2. If my turn 2 was strong, and it could have been strong if I had just rolled even average, I think I could have maybe not won, but definitely had a stronger performance overall. I think a win was possible because I feel like I did everything right in turns 1 and 2, but then my dice rolls let me down in 2. And again, it's easy to blame it on something like that, but sincerely, that's the way it went. And ultimately, my brutes ran into a wall that they just couldn't break through, and then off the back of that, just got swept because I wasn't able to secure the double, which, to be fair, wouldn't have been necessary had I had a better turn 2. But ultimately, it was what it was, and the Chosen just moved into me and blended me, essentially. And that was the end of my game. So, that was my Sunday morning, losing to the reigning world champion.
What was the score for that one?
16 to me, 42 to Nicholas.
Okay, yeah. Big difference, but understandable.
Yeah, so then I really kind of fell from grace at that point. So I fell down the rankings quite considerably. So games 3 and 4, I was playing in the kind of top table area. Round 5, I was still in that area, but now obviously I've essentially gone 3 and 1. So I'm in the upper percentile, but I've obviously come down. So now I'm playing against a lovely chap called Kyle. Also received another of my favourite game votes. He was an absolute legend, really, really awesome guy. He was running Blades of Corn, and clearly, again, didn't quite comprehend the awesome might of brutes, because much like the dragon player before me, essentially ran his stuff kind of up the middle, and then he chose to go first against me, ran his stuff up the middle, and then the brutes killed everything.
Oh, wow.
So it was a super straightforward game in that regard, but Kyle legitimately was such an entertaining human to play against. I had a really great time playing him. There was more to it than that. There was basically the mission was super interesting, but he had bloodletters on the kind of outskirts. He had like bloodthirsters in the middle. It's weird, right? Iron Jaws are bad at the moment. Blades of Corn are worse. So I feel like Kyle genuinely, much like myself, I suppose, had done really well to go 3 and 1 with an army of that power level. And I think, Kyle played it really well. I just think, unfortunately, in this one instance, he came up against a list that just does what he does better than what his does. And ultimately, that was just kind of the undoing of it. But, yeah, I hope that in the future I'll get another chance to play him, and we'll have armies that are a little bit more interesting and can facilitate a better gameplay experience. But, yeah, so basically, my final tally based on 5 games was 4 wins, 1 loss. So
it's pretty good.
Yeah, really good, man. I mean, I'm buzzing, right? I'm thinking this is really good. Now we have the option, right? Because basically we're being told you can leave because for overall purposes, this game doesn't matter. Submit your soft scores if you want to go. You can go. And I go, I've gone 4 and 1. The only people I can play against are the other people who have gone 4 and 1, who are all great players. One of which being Richie. Credit where credit's due to Richie. He's done amazing as well. Maybe I'll try and get him on another time to talk through this or whatever, or maybe the moment's passed. This episode needs to go out this weekend. Sorry, Richie. Much love. You were a great companion over the weekend, and well done on your also 4 and 1. And again, Richie is worth mentioning. The only person Richie lost to was Nicholas as well. So both me and Rich, our only losses was to the reigning world champion.
That's quite funny. It could be seen as you fed him the win.
Yes, maybe. But yes, so anyway, long story short is we decided to do game 6.
I mean, out of interest, how many people did that game 6? Because I assume most people, it's like you're waiting around for the end ceremony, so you might as well play in that game, unless you're absolutely tired and you just want to chill out in Bugman's or go round the exhibition centre or shop or something.
So round 6. I'll tell you. So round 6 was played by 23 individuals, apparently.
Ooh, out of the 80 or so. So quite a lot of people stops at that point, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a long day, so I could understand why people would do that as well.
No, absolutely. But yeah, my game 6, I get to play against a lovely lad called Michael. He has just lost to Nicholas, the overall winner.
He's smashing everyone up.
Yeah, so I lose to Nicholas game 4. This Michael guy loses to him game 5. And now I get to play against him. Now, bear in mind, Michael is also one of the better players in the world. I was speaking to Matt from the AOS team about who I'm facing. And he said, oh, yeah, he's great. He was only a couple of points off of winning last year, like the whole same thing that Nicholas won. I was like, oh, so he's also really, really good. And he said, yeah, and he's also running what is probably the most optimized army in the game right now.
Was it Nighthorn?
No, it was Lumineth Realm Lords.
Ah, wow.
Can I tell you about Lumineth Realm Lords, Phil, just as a amusing point, right? And I said this to Matt. I basically, what this weekend showed me is I've been living in a happy, fluffy land of AOS4 as a lovely balanced game and so much better than other products. Until I saw this. Like, I was literally like, oh no, this game actually is a mess, isn't it? And they need to fix these army rules. Because if I was to say to you, Phil, that Lumineth Realm Lords have a unit called a Spirit of the Wind, right? Mm-hmm. They've got Huracan, Spirit of the Wind. How many times in a turn do you think that Huracan, Spirit of the Wind, can move?
Ooh, Spirit of the Wind. I assume more than once.
Correct.
So I would assume on average twice, but, maybe 3 times. Let's say 3.
So, Phil, Huracan, Spirit of the Wind, moves.
Is it a character?
It's the one with the arrow pointing downwards with the swirl.
Oh, yeah, the strange animal.
Yeah, the cow man.
Yeah, okay, I know the one, yeah.
Or at least I think it is. Let me just...
That sounds about right.
It does sound about right.
Sounds windy, yeah.
Right, so here it goes. In the movement phase, it moves. I can't remember what its move characteristic is. May as well be 100, right? So, in the movement phase, it moves. Then, in the shooting phase, what do you think it does, Phil?
It moves as well.
Well, no.
Does it move, shoot, move?
No, it shoots, then moves.
Oh, okay, right.
So, in the movement phase, it moves. In the shooting phase, it shoots, then moves.
Yeah.
Then what does it do in the charge phase, Phil?
Does it... No, it can't move, then charge.
Wait, yeah, it charges in the charge phase.
Oh, it just charges, okay.
And then what's it do at the start of the combat phase, Phil?
Well, pile in.
No. It moves.
How? In what way?
It has a rampage, Phil, that moves.
Oh, a rampage. I see.
And then what does it do after that, Phil?
Does it consolidate in some way?
It piles in, yes. That's right. So
Wait,
it moves, shoots, moves, charges, moves, piles in.
Oh,
It
wow.
basically moves 5 times.
Okay, that is quite a lot. Is he really killy, though? Or is he not all that?
He's not super killy, but he again, you can't lock him down. You can't do anything to him. Like, if you catch him, in my turn 1, I annoyed Mike because I happened to roll an 11-inch charge and caught one of these wind things, not realising what they did.
How many has he got?
He has 2 of them.
Oh, it's not a named character.
No.
I mean, how many, cows floating on whirlwinds can you have in a game? That seems ridiculous.
Well, if you talk to every Illuminef Ramlord player, two.
Right.
Because this is basically the net list that everyone runs, is literally decidedly the most reinforced, or the most used thing. But anyway, yeah, so I caught one in my turn one and killed it outright.
Oh, nice.
And he was super butthurt about that. It was quite funny. Again, Mike, good guy, but he definitely didn't like that. And anyway, yeah, like this is the thing. That to me in isolation didn't make any sense. But then when you realise, so basically, right, this army was Teclis, who is crazy. Like, okay, dies to a stiff breeze, but you have to get to him. And he is, like everything else in this army, quick. Then you've got Hurricane Wind Chargers reinforced, which I believe is the unit of cow cavalry.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, they're pretty good. Yeah.
Who move like crazy, Phil. Like they basically move, shoot, move, charge, but then just pile in. So they only move like 4 times. But do you know what happens when you get into those guys, Phil?
I can't quite remember.
But they don't die because they're incredibly durable. They're 3 wounds each. They've got a 5-up ward save because they're next to Teclis. It's like you can't even kill them.
Yeah, I had a real struggle dealing with them. I think it was because you could put a spell on them that gave them a ward save. So I guess he did it a different way. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it was either Teclis gave it to him, whatever it was. Like
I think they can. Yeah, there's a spell that they can ignore rend as well.
Oh yeah,
when you attack them, so they can become light.
What I found playing against this army is why it basically points out to me why I stopped playing Elder in 40k but this is like that. Like, it's not as bad as what Elder were in 40k, but the stuff that it is just annoying enough to just be really annoying because
it's a bit oppressive.
Yeah, it's like they're everywhere. When you catch them, they're surprisingly durable. And it's not like I managed to get 7 brutes, and I stacked a bunch of buff on those brutes. I managed to get 7 brutes into that unit, and I killed 3 of those cows, as in the cavalry.
Yeah.
And these are things that when they charge into bloodthirsters in the game before, kill them. So this same unit that can kill a bloodthirster effortlessly can't kill cow cavalry. It's like this. There is something wrong with the way that they've designed this army. It's a mess. It needs to be fixed. Because literally, and again, no disrespect to Mike, he's a great player and he's playing to win, so he's brought the best thing. But it did expose to me this has to be solved because this army.
Yeah. I mean, I beat the Luminef that I played against in the tournament I went to, but they were really strong. Like, they can cast loads of magic. They've got units of like 20 archers because they're reinforced. So
yeah, you had that as well. And they were normally in the General's Regiment.
Yeah, normally hiding behind spears as well. And it's like they can shoot in, your turn and their turn, and they've got loads of buffs, and you say they're dual, but they don't really have a weakness because they can do everything in every phase very well, and they're still costed quite efficiently, which I think is a downside. I think every army should have an archetypical weak point in whether that's a phase or their save, their attacks. Like, there's got to be something within their army that is poor because it should be a rock paper scissors game, right? So
I agree.
Every army should be really good at one thing, or just averagely okay, but ideally have one good thing, one really bad thing, and everything else is okay.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem with this army. I think it's like you can look at it and say, "Oh, it's a glass cannon army." It's not. I mean, if it is a glass cannon army,
some units are, but I think the problem with them in a way is like if they were a glass cannon army, they circumvent that via magic, but they're so good at magic, you can't really shut their magic down that easily because they cast just better than you, and they've got a free terrain piece that makes their casting better as well. So it's not what you can do.
Yeah, I just really hope for the health of the game they fix it. I have absolutely 100% faith that they will. Referencing Rob from The Honest Wargamer, his perspective on it is that the General's Regiment buff working on range units needs to go away, which is something I've already parroted in this segment, but also that shooting out sequence should be a 2 CP ability, and I agree with that as well. I think if charging out sequence is 2 CP, shooting out sequence should be 2 CP.
Yeah, I mean, I think the +1 to hit on the shooting is probably quite strong. I think, I've always said it, I think shooting in this game is very strong due to the way the mechanics of the game work. So when you sort of over-index in it, so you take reinforced units and then stratagems cost the same CP, whereas, they're still doing 10th edition, but in 9th edition, 40k, if a unit was over a certain size, it cost you extra CP, and that was like a balancing mechanic. Whereas now you're almost encouraged to take big units in AOS because, one, there's no leadership bravery test that you need to take, so there's no weakness in having a large unit. But also it means you get great efficiencies. Like I said, if I've got a reinforced unit of archers and then it costs me only 1 CP to shoot in my opponent's turn, that's a no-brainer in terms of efficiency over just a 10-man unit of that same unit. And getting to shoot extra. Shooting, I think, is where AOS breaks itself slightly, because you go, then I go, then you go, then I go in terms of combat. So even though if it's my turn, I get to go first, I'm only really going first with like 1 unit most of the time. But otherwise I get to pick the battles, but ultimately it's quite a balanced system, I think, whereas shooting is like in 40k, if I'm shooting everything that I've got, that makes me going before you very advantageous. Yeah,
totally. And I think that's the thing. I think making shooting out of sequence 2 CP is the thing that has to happen, but also increasing the points of that unit in particular would be necessary as well. And I think that's the thing. I think the reality is Age of Sigmar 4th edition has been around for about 3 months now. They've got lots of really good initial data. I believe the team will improve this. By the time this podcast comes out, they may have improved it already. And I think there's going to be a lot of people who are looking at their Realm Lord armies and going, or their Night Lord armies, and reevaluating their appreciation of the archetype, because they're clearly very strong. And it was a real privilege playing Mike and Nicholas. It was a privilege playing all my opponents, but those guys in particular, because they are at such a level, it really exposed me to the level of play that sits beyond journeyman status that I kind of have within the competitive scene. And I surprised myself and I impressed myself with how I was able to, with a relatively weak army, challenge these players and make them actually think about what I was doing.
Okay. What was your final score on that last game?
So I got 32 to Michael's 44.
I mean, that's pretty close.
Yeah, it was pretty close, to be fair. Again, as I say, Michael's mate Joe came over, really lovely lad as well, and I was chatting with him, and he was saying, he was like, we were having a funny conversation about it, and I agree with him. I think he was actually surprised that it was as close as it was, because I think most people hadn't been able to ebb much out of it. So I mean, what it's shown me is the levels to the game. I feel comfortable as a player that I can hang in that world, but at the same time, my army is definitely hindering my ability to perform. I'm really happy with the Jaws list that I put together. I think it's really good by the standards of Jaws armies, but I don't think I just don't think they're there when you stack them up against things like Nighthaunt and Realm Lords.
Yeah, I mean,
and Slaves to Darkness.
Yeah, because slaves are meant to be pretty good at the moment as well.
Oh,
yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's one of those things where you might have unlocked one of the better lists, or best lists potentially, for your army, but as you say, overall faction-wise, they're not doing very well. However, if you hold out another month or so and there's a bit of a rebalance going on, you might find that list will take to the top. And, potentially it sounds like you could have won it if there weren't two, golden ticket winners already there. But then who knows who you would have ended up playing.
I wouldn't be so arrogant. I wouldn't be so arrogant to assert that. But what I will say is basically my loss to Nicholas pushed me down quite considerably. I then got a win to get back up within contention. But then I came up against another great player who already had a golden ticket and they got pushed down again. So ultimately, I'm not saying I could definitely beat any of the other players. Like, that's not the case at all. I genuinely think I could have lost to anyone. I should have lost to Matt by all accounts, but I managed to pull it off. So that's the thing. Like, 100%, I'm not wanting people to listen to me say this like I'm owed it or that I feel like I deserved it more than other people. But it just feels a bit ridiculous to have played the competition I played and be in a situation where at the time we played it and to essentially come 12th overall. Because it's like, because a lot of people with like, a lot of people, like people ahead of me, like lost game 1, lost game 2, lost game 3. Like these people who were obviously, a bit submarining in that sense. And then you're like, oh, okay. And again, like even like Richie lost game 3 to Nicholas. So he won 2, lost to Nicholas, won 2 more, and then lost his last game against a nice lad called Ben. So yeah, it was just one of those things where, I don't know, you can't help but just speculate because you just feel a bit like, is it correct that should happen? Or is there a way that, they could have basically at the end of game 5, there was only a small percentage of players who had gone 4-1. Like I'm looking at it now on BCP, the small percentage of players that went 4-1 by going into game 6 was essentially Richie, myself, a guy called Jimbo, a guy called Joe, Mike, who I ended up playing, and Ben, who Richie started playing. So 1, 2, yeah, like literally, it was like 4 or 5 of us. So you should have I don't know. I feel like one of us. I mean, I still lost, right? So I'm not saying I should have come like whatever, but I don't think I should have been in the top 3.
It's odd that I assume all you 5 people or 6 or however it was done should have been playing each other, right?
Which we were.
If that case, if you're gonna kind of buffer people into groups, that should also be reflected in the rankings. So all of you are playing for the top 6 spots if there's 6 of you or 5. Yeah, because it would have been 6. Because that's how they do it in other events. I'm pretty sure the LVO does it that way for 40k, and I wouldn't be surprised. I thought that's what they did at the US Open events as well, where basically the last game you all got put into I can't remember what the word they call it, if it's a capsule or a bubble or something, and it's you're grouping for and then you're playing for your position in that grouping. So whether you're the 10th to 15th or 15th to 20th, you're playing for that final spot. And if you don't want to play it because you've had enough, that's fine. Your place, if you're in the 15 to 20th category, you'll just place 20th. And the other people can fight it out for their spot. And I think that's sort of a fairer way of doing that sort of final ranking system. Because it sort of reflects that you've done so well to get there in the first place, as you say, rather than someone that lost their first game, but then worked their way up from there.
Yeah, and here's the thing, right, as well. Like, as I keep saying, I'm not pretending that I had a hard run or in terms of like matchups and other bits and pieces. So I'm not. Again, it's just that thing where I feel like going back to the full circle on it. I think pick a lane, do the thing, but do it in a way that doesn't punish people for having to pay the best people in the final games. Like at the end of the day, I feel like everyone who gets through the initial games and comes up on the top of the pile, it feels like that's sort of representative of the pecking order of the event. And it feels like there should be a segregation at that point to try and protect the people who've been able to kind of come up to that point so as they don't fall too far back down. And maybe it sounds like sour grapes, but it's more just a basis of I'm speaking more to the experiences that I've seen for people like yourself and Richie and even myself in this instance where, yeah, it feels rough to play in what kind of feels like a final type setting and then to fall so far off, but that's all.
Yeah. I mean, I sort of guess it all depends on the pairings and the Swiss pairing system. So
exactly.
Yeah,
it's all fairly random at the end of the day, but yeah. Look, I mean, going back to the positives though, 6 really great games of Warhammer. I love Age of Sigmar in a tournament setting, even when I'm playing against the craziness of the Lumineth Realm Lords. I still love it. I think the game's great. I think it's in a great place. I think a balance update will help it become even better, and I'm 100% on board for that. And I think, yeah, the team at Warhammer World did a great job, and I really enjoyed it. So overall, I mean, myself and Richie were very aligned on the fact that it was just a really great weekend of gaming. The only thing that, let it down was that not more of our close friends were there to enjoy it with us. I think that was the only thing that was sort of, a letdown with that side of things. Or not a letdown, because that sounds like I'm saying you let us down, Phil. But what I'm saying is it was the only thing that we missed from the whole weekend.
Fair enough. That's fair. And like I said, if I would have been there, if I could have been there, I would have. Although what's interesting is you say about the golden ticket people, because you two both got in on the waiting list. If you had excluded people that were golden ticket holders already, that would have been a couple of extra slots. So, if I was able to go, I maybe could have, but that's I don't think you can regulate for stuff like that quite easily.
No, and deep down, I don't want them to. I just raise it because it was a topic of conversation between myself and Richie on the drive home.
Yeah,
and it felt like it was worth highlighting it.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, I'm pretty sure we talked about it once before for the 40k grand tournament where they had 4 heats in a year, but people would, and I think they released originally all the tickets at the same time, so people would buy tickets to all 4 of them, and then, in heat 1 or 2, someone could win that golden ticket, but then they're still going to the other heats, even though they've already won. Which is a similar situation. And you can't begrudge people from doing that, but at the same time, it does feel like you're taking a spot away from someone else who deserves a fair shot at that ticket. And that would be my only issue with that sort of system. But as you say, it's a bit harder to regulate, especially with the golden ticket system, I think, at the moment, because they're not doing heats as regularly as they did that one year with the 40k ones.
No, totally. But there you go. Hopefully people enjoyed my recap of things that happened and my overall appraisal of Warhammer World events. I think, honestly... Oh, and I suppose the other things worth mentioning, terrain's amazing. The terrain they have at Warhammer World is top-notch. I had a mild gripe, which is that we're using the General's Handbook, and the General's Handbook has very specific recommendations of the size of terrain in the area. And they didn't have the correct sized terrain. And a lot of the time it created some asymmetry, which is fine in a normal gaming scenario. But if you're going to play in a tournament, it feels like we should have the right terrain for the right job. So if the mission calls for a small place of power, we shouldn't have a piece of terrain that is a medium place of power, for example.
So, because doesn't every mission have a recommended terrain layout?
Correct.
So were you playing those, or were you just go so you weren't saying you just turned up to the table and we'll just play it however it appears?
No. So the TOs, the team, went around reorganizing the terrain to match the layout.
Oh, so they did it for you. Oh, that's good.
That is really good. But as I say, they weren't using the correct sizes of terrain.
Okay. I mean, a minor gripe.
A minor gripe, but here's the thing. If we're doing it, I feel like we should be doing it right. You know what I mean? It's like, to me, if the mission calls for 2 medium obstacles, we should have 2 medium obstacles. If not,
the only downside with that is if across all of those missions you need way more terrain than's on a table. If you had like a fixed amount of terrain, like so many of a certain size, and you just use all of those in every single mission, but you just change where they are, that's really easy. But if you actually need twice as much, because in some missions you need certain sizes and then in other missions you need other sizes, then you basically need to be like, okay, where are we storing all this extra terrain? It's got to be under the table. You got to swap it out between missions. That then becomes a lot harder to actually make feasible.
And I 100% accept and sympathise with that perspective for every independent tournament organiser up and down the country. I 100% agree with it. If you go and play at the London Grand Tournament and they're doing it like that, fair enough. But this is Warhammer World. There's no excuse.
Make it special.
They wrote the rules. They wrote the rules.
It's like don't write the rules like that. If you, because here's the thing: the expectation is that yes, it's difficult for tournament organisers, but the expectation almost is everyone at home playing the grand, the General's Handbook missions should have all of this terrain. And it's like, and if you Warhammer World can't have it, then how's everyone else meant to? Admittedly, they've got a slightly different scale problem, but yeah.
But this is the thing, right? Like, so one of the most common occurrence for me is we would have that place of power that's the siphon, the kind of almost like gazebo with a siphon in it. You know that one?
Is it the one with the big ball on top?
Yeah, the one with the big ball on top. So we'd have that. But then complementing that, we'd have like the waterfall-y thing that came in that same kit. And basically one of those is a small piece, one of them's a medium piece. But we basically had those and they were repping our places of power. But the thing is, and again, it sounds really finicky, but basically the medium-sized one is considerably bigger footprint than the small one. And that means a couple of things. One, it's easier for models to get to it, to activate it. Two, it gets in the way more. And three, it just creates that asymmetry, which causes issues in game. And that's the thing. It's like, again, me playing at home, me playing in a more casual environment, I don't care. I'm not using those layouts. Who cares? But if we're doing it, it feels like that's something we should be doing right. And that's my only other gripe with the whole thing.
Fair enough.
But, credit where credit's due, the terrain that is on that table, glorious, beautiful.
Yeah, I saw some of your photos. They're really good. And actually different terrain from what I've seen before, I think. Yeah,
so they did have to use more standardised terrain layout. So they weren't able to use more of the beautiful thematic stuff that they've got, which is a real shame, to be fair.
Okay.
Because when we went to the campaign one,
there was like the clouds with the waterfalls and all sorts of stuff. Yeah,
incredible. Like, to me, I'd be less critical of this if they just lent into that. You know what I mean? Like, that to me would have been great. But as it is, they kind of use the same kind of stuff over and over again. But there you go. But that's it. Other than that, though, gorgeous. Great event, great people, wonderful weekend. Had a great time. Clearly a little bit salty about not winning the whole thing. But, that's just my stupid delusions and overall sense of self-importance. But sincerely, congratulations to everyone who organised, ran, was involved in it. Again, Matt from the AOS team, amazing job. Same to Steve and his events team, Ed and others. I always feel bad. I'm now forgetting the name of the other guy who I really like. He used to work in he may still work in the Warhammer exhibition team, building dioramas and stuff. He's a really lovely guy. I've met him on several occasions. Just can't summon his name up, so apologies to him if he's listening for whatever reason. But it was a great weekend. Can't wait to go back there again and play more AOS. I'm loving it. I think more people should get out there and play the game because I think it's great. Even with my gripes about some of the armies at the moment, but confident those will be fixed. So yeah, that was it. Thanks very much. Phil, do me a favour and do the transition noise. My voice has gone down.
Oh my god.
No Warhammer 40,000 topics this week then, Phil?
It seems so, but we can cram some in now if you want.
Well, yeah, I did get the Blood Angel box set, which is nice. The Lamates Mini was actually really cool. The Astrov Mini as well, much better in person than when photographed, as it were.
Often the way.
Nice. So they're quite cool. Picked up a Hammerfall bunker recently as well.
Madness. Why did you do that?
Because I'm convinced it's a really, really good backfield option for protecting your home objective.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, can it actually sit on objectives?
Yeah, it's just a vehicle.
But it
moveless objective vehicle, rather.
I guess it can't literally go on top of an objective, but it can go. No, but surely when you deploy it, it's treated as a terrain piece, right?
No, that doesn't exist anymore. It's just a vehicle with no movement.
How odd.
Yeah, you can deploy it inside a ruin.
That's very odd.
Yeah, I know, but that's how it works now.
All right. Maybe I'm thinking about how the sort of the...
how it's always worked.
No, I'm thinking more like how, the faction train in AOS, I'm pretty sure they can't be...
Oh, yeah. But AOS is a more sensible game, Phil. We know this already.
Okay. I mean, it's still got its, downsides, I'm sure. There were some elements to it, but yeah, I mean, that's interesting that you can just stick something on an objective. It reminds me of a time I was doing, I want to say doubles with either Richard or Joe, maybe it was Joe when we were doing a doubles years ago. This was, and our opponent had, I think it was like I want to say a fell blade. It was like, I'm sure it was one of the Space Marine super heavies, and they in their first turn just moved it up and plonked it on top of, I think it was the relic when there was basically literally one objective in the whole mission, and they sat on top of it, and it was so big. You can't get within range of the objective marker to score it at all because it's just taking up so much space. And it was also so tough that we didn't really have anything that could deal with it because it was one of those, weirdly, we took quite a casual list, and I think it was the first time they were doing like a doubles tournament. So actually quite a lot of people took some filth. That was an interesting game. It reminds me of that you can just go, oh, cool, I'm just going to stick something right on top of the objective.
Yeah, I mean, the aura of the objective makes it difficult for you to 100% conceal it with the Hammerfall bunker. Like, you can't completely cover it in terms of its entire footprint, but you can, get quite a lot of it concealed. Most people's terrain layouts will accommodate it in the sense that, like, it would be very difficult to deny altogether, but you can certainly, in the right scenario, cease things from happening. And again, it's an interesting rule set because it basically just shoots all the time because it's, just a gun platform.
Does it get a free Overwatch? Is that right?
Yeah, I got the Space Marine Codex here. Phil. Let me just check the old data sheet for Hammerfall bunkers. So Hammerfall bunker, Phil, it is movement nothing, toughness 12, a 2-up armor save,
Wow.
14 wounds, with a leadership of 6+, and an OC of nothing.
So it can't actually score the objective, which is
No.
But I guess it can deny your opponent also scoring it. And I guess the interesting thing is, if, as you said, there's like one little bit that you can still get on, you use one of your battle line units, so it's then sticky, then that unit can go off of it. And I guess they would have to go into combat probably with your Hammerfall bunker to try and score it off you, which obviously they would then do. But then I guess if you equipped it with the flamer option, it's then just doing a lot of murder.
Yeah, and the thing is they need to commit to that and to try to kind of get to it. And a lot of the time people are using those abilities that keep them outside of free to, sneak onto the objective in the in their turns and stuff. Whereas obviously with this, you can obviously go just outside of free of it, but it's so massive, and if it's smack bang on the center of the objective, you're not going to get onto the objective. And then, like you say, it's going to shoot you because you can give it a heavy flamer array, which is a twin linked heavy flamer with 2d6 shots.
I mean, that's okay. It's not super great, but it's pretty good.
Or you can have the heavy bolter, which is a sustained hits 1 twin linked heavy bolter with 6 shots.
I mean,
I'd probably go with the heavy flamer.
I guess because the heavy flamer, can you shoot that one in combat?
You can shoot all because
it's a vehicle, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, so its real rules are fortification. While an enemy unit is only within engaged range of 1 or more fortifications from your army, that unit can still be selected as the target of ranged attacks. But each time such an attack is made, unless it's made with a pistol, subtract 1 from hit rolls. Models in that unit do not need to take desperate escape tests due to falling back while battle shocked, except for those that will move over any models when doing so. It's got ceramite cover. Each time a ranged attack is allocated to a model, if that model is not fully visible to every model in the attacking unit because of this fortification, that model has the benefit of cover. And then defensive array, you can target this fortification with fire overwatch stratagem for 0 CBP. It could do so even if you have already targeted another unit with that stratagem this turn. This fortification can only be targeted with that stratagem once per turn. It's just an annoying thing that gets in the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think the flamers probably work out being better purely because in Overwatch they're just hitting, and in combat they're just hitting, whereas I think in combat the bolters would be -1 to hit because you're a vehicle.
Correct, yeah. The flamers, I think, are the way to go. I think the 2d6 flamer shots are your
especially
are your
if all you're caring about is defending that one objective. You don't really care about range per se. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing as well. It's like people tend to try and use like really little slippery units like like mandrakes or scouts or something relatively, weak in terms of their overall kind of defensive profile, and a bunch of heavy flamers are going to really ruin their day. But not least the fact that the thing is, armor 2+ with toughness 12.
Well, that is very good. Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at the points. It's 175.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a lot, but for something that is got a very high chance of keeping an objective safe and secure, that's pretty decent, I think, especially in a Space Marine unit, Space Marine army, because everything's quite expensive. Everything is well over 100 normally. So yeah, I mean, that seems, it'd be interesting to see how it actually works. I mean, you could just, potentially it could just be shot off the board by something big, right? If it's got line of sight to it.
Of course,
which
I mean,
is the main stipulation.
Yeah, if someone wants to put resources into getting rid of the fortification, well, great.
Because they're not doing it into the rest of your army, I guess.
Well, that's it. Because it's not like you're getting rid of it. I mean, this is the thing. Like, that's as durable as a Land Raider. Like, it's not like you can just get rid of one of them.
No, it's not easy. That's for sure.
So and it's got the missile array on top as well.
Oh yeah.
So it can fire 2 crack missile shots or 2 frag missile shots. So that's pretty good.
Yes, and I assume you get to pick as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
you get to pick.
Do you remember?
And it benefits from Oath of Moment as well.
Oh yeah, no, that is true. Yeah,
so just get all your rerolls.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you remember the days where sometimes if something had 2 missile options, you had to pick before the game started which one you were going to have, and then that was it. You were stuck with it.
I remember having to pay points for the Skyfire missiles.
Yes, yeah. I mean, they were very good only if you were against flyers, basically. But, back in those days, loads of people took flyers, so...
Yeah. But wasn't that, like, missile upgrade, like, 40 points or something wild?
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised.
No, I wouldn't be surprised either. But, so pick that up. So that's cool. I also, Phil, I will say, I didn't actually directly play it because I was... utterly zoinked after a weekend of Age of Sigmar. But on Tuesday, I got involved and arbitrated, observed, played along, if you will, a game of boarding actions.
Oh, yeah.
So
what was your take?
It feels and seems like a really, really interesting way to play 40k, to be fair. I think it's... definitely piqued my interest. I mean, again, it's 40k with extra steps, right? So that there's all sorts of extra stuff you have to think about.
Yes, but in a way, it actually takes back a lot of the things, I think, and it sort of streamlines it. So, I got the book when it came out. I've read the rules, and I had a cursory glance at some of the missions because they say it's all the same missions for Marks of Omen, which I assume is correct. So things like line of sight is now like more like true line of sight. So you can, if you can see one man in a unit and the rest are hiding around a corner, you can actually only kill that one man, which I personally really prefer that kind of rule system because that's what we had in like 6th and 7th edition 40k, and actually means the game's less lethal as well, which I think actually would, benefit the game because that's one of its constant biggest criticisms is that shooting's too overpowerful and you need loads of terrain. So, but with simple rules changes like that, then it fixes a lot of those things. And there's a much heavier restriction in terms of your units that you can take for your armies, and each army, each faction basically has between, I think, like 1 and maybe 5 different sort of detachment types that it can take. And I think each of those has specific loadouts in terms of what you can take. So one of the Space Marine ones is basically all Terminators, but that's all you can take. Whereas the other ones don't allow you to have Terminators. So you can't have a couple of Marines and like a handful of Terminators. So I like those sorts of thematic restrictions that they've put in place. But it does feel like, the Eldari Drukhari get a lot of love and have tons of different detachments, whereas the other factions just get like, here's your 1 or 2 different play styles, that's your lot, guys, which feels a bit mean, but I sort of understand why, because obviously some factions do lead into having lots and lots of different play styles with different units, different unit combinations.
Games Workshop's love affair with elves goes on, right? Like they just can't let them be rubbish. It's something deep rooted in their soul that they just have to make elves unbelievable. But I think that's the thing with boarding actions is it's interesting how much it strips back from the main game system. It's interesting how it expresses those ideas. I do agree with you that the line of sight system is superior. I think the way that they negotiate, navigate, combat within those corridor systems is quite interesting. I quite like the interactivity of the terrain, the fact that the terrain has been built so as, the doors swing open and there's all this.
Yeah.
stuff to it, which is quite nice.
I think the one change, and I had to reread it several times to make sure I was understanding it correctly, because in the previous edition, a unit could move and then it could open a door. So you could potentially daisy chain some units. So the first unit activates, that moves up, opens a door, then another unit can like run through that door. But now it seems once you've done all your movement, then you can choose units to open or close doors. So basically, if the game starts and all the doors are closed, which is how it would be, that first turn you can't go through any doors basically, because you'll be just moving up to them in your movement phase. Then at the end of the movement phase, you can open up all the doors. So which slows down the game potentially, but then maybe it makes it more balanced overall. So it's interesting that they made that change. I obviously don't know why they've done that, but yeah, seems interesting.
I guess it just kind of creates a little bit of a kind of, I suppose, an initial tension within the game where, like, the first turn you can make decisions about where you want to engage, how you want to engage, why you want to prioritize things. I quite like the underdog mechanics they've incorporated into it as well. I quite like the idea that the underdog has like additional options, so you get like extra deployment zones. I like how they've broken down the deployment zones, so it's like broken up into there's like 3-4
little squares, because the board's kind of on a grid layout, and the map sort of determines what those are. And as you say, there's several, but each one can only have one unit and one character in them, so you can't just overwhelm one deployment zone. You do have to physically spread out, and I think if you then can't fit any more of your army onto the deployment zones, because there's normally only like 3, I think they then have to go into strategic reserve.
Correct, yeah. And I think characters are individual models. They can't join units, and I believe they have to occupy their own deployment zone as well.
No, they can share a deployment zone with a unit.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was a mistake that we made when we were playing it the other day.
No, because that was how it was before, and I remember when I read it that they kept that rule in. But what's interesting is if a unit, if a character has like an ability that says, "Oh, if it joins a unit, the unit gets this benefit." I think you have to. Is it like it's an action now, or it's either an action or it's a stratagem? I think it's an action that you have to do to then give that ability to one unit, but then you can move out of range of that unit. However, if there's an ability that says if a unit is joined by a character, it gets this buff, it just doesn't ever get it. So there's a bunch of effectively special rules that your units would normally have that they just don't get anymore. One of the interesting ones was actually this sort of the blast like stratagem. There's like a stratagem that allows you to use a blast weapon, and it does I think it does a couple more extra hits, but it just sort of, I remember reading it going, it just feels slightly underwhelming. It's not like you're doing the maximum number of shots or anything in terms of like what you could be rolling to represent a grenade going off in a kind of close confines. But I think it actually maybe allows you to damage people that are out of line of sight, which is the benefit that you can get from that stratagem. So there's some interesting like kind of core stratagems in that game that I think makes it really interesting.
Oh, I totally agree. And I think as well, like building 500-point forces is really interesting within 40k, and you realize how I enjoy the restrictions. Basically, I like the idea of building lists with more restrictions and more compromises, and trying to kind of prioritize what you're going to put in 500 points of say Space Marines or Elder, for example, is much more difficult than the abundance of options that 2,000 points makes available to you. So, yeah, it is. It's really fun. I think I genuinely am excited to actually play a bit more of it. At the moment, I'm scheduled to play Blood Bowl next week. Down the club.
That's exciting.
Yeah, that is exciting.
Who are you playing? Is it orcs you've got?
No, humans. I'm a human. Not the nobility, the old humans.
Did you buy the Forge World upgrade for the humans?
I did, yes.
I'm going to say Bright Star Crusaders.
Yes, something like that.
Yeah, I remember really loving that upgrade kit and really wanting to buy it. And I think actually that's how I became friends with Giuseppe, who was a Forge World painter at the time, because he posted up, because he's the one that painted the models that appeared on the web store. And I was asking him how he did his like paint scheme. I think it was specifically the sort of purpley bluey hues on the silver. And yeah, we got chatting via Facebook, and we sort of became friends after that and hung out a couple of times, which was nice. The power of the internet making friends. But yeah, that team was great, and it's a bit of a shame they never continued on that trend of doing those kind of customized Blood Bowl teams, because they did one for the orcs and then one for the humans, and then that was it really.
Yeah, and I do really regret not having picked up the orc one, to tell you the truth, because looking back at it, it looks fabulous. Like the orc one they did was but the Bright Crusaders, as they were called,
that was it,
were absolutely stunning. Had to be bought. I've always been a human player in the game of Blood Bowl. They've always been my kind of go-to. Nice. I always enjoy the idea of playing Blood Bowl with the team that's not especially good at anything, you know?
Yeah, the everyman. I mean, I sort of like that as the concept, even for things like Wartime. I think Wartime would be really interesting, where everyone's just humans, because actually there are loads of variations within the sort of human warbands. And sort of doing like a human league for Blood Bowl, I think would also be really interesting, just because actually there's enough variety in it to keep it interesting, I think.
Yeah, I mean, they're talking about Doom the Club. They're talking about doing a Old Hammer campaign system using exclusively Chaos Space Marines. So they were talking about maybe doing like a 4th edition or 3rd edition 40k system.
Wow.
Where we built a slow build, but everyone just builds a Chaos Space Marine army. So we all just use the same Chaos Space Marine codex.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, but again, lots of variety within Chaos with the gods to have enough variety and stuff, even
for sure.
Before, like, nowadays, where you specifically have, like, Thousand Sons and Death Guard. Like, in those days, they would have all been under that kind of Chaos banner, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, they were all just in one book back in the day, and they had all sorts of, like, crazy systems that enabled you to, you know, mix them up and play them in loads of different ways. So
I'm sure they had things like, you know, your champions could ascend, and maybe I don't know about 3rd edition, but obviously in like Rogue Trader and probably even 2nd edition, you had like mutations and boons that you could give to characters to make them a bit more unique.
100%. You used to have a system of like lesser rewards, greater rewards, and all sorts of stuff that you rolled for, basically, which is super interesting. But yeah, no, the Auckland Raiders were the other one.
That's it. Yeah.
God, I want the Auckland Raiders. When I look at them, I'm like, why didn't I just buy them?
Here's the thing. I think they were quite expensive, and you could never just buy the upgrade pack on its own. They came with the human team. So obviously everyone had bought the starter box. So they've already got human and orc minis. So it's like I'm sort of rebuying it again when I don't need it. And that was the thing that I think put me off the most. Whereas like, if you could have just bought them on its own as a resin upgrade pack for like half the price, I probably would have done it, because I sort of desperately wanted them, but could never financially justify them to myself to do it, especially since I never actually even got around to building the human and orc teams. Because I just converted up my original halfling team and played with those, like the flagellant madman that I am, playing on super hard mode.
Well, that's it. But I think that's the thing, man. Like, I think, I'm excited to that we're supposed to be doing a bit of a Blood Bowl league. So keen to get involved with that. I mean, at the moment, I'm hitting again, noting that they could tomorrow put out a balance update for AOS, but I'm just now in a holding pattern with AOS for a bit as I wait for the balance update following the tournament that we've obviously talked about extensively already. I'm just in that point where I want to dive in and refine and build new lists, but my problem is that there's just no point right now, because it's like in the next week or two they're going to update points at the very least. So it's just all it's wasted effort.
Yeah,
So,
that's, I mean, in a way that will probably be quite good for me, because from the last event we went, I had to borrow some of your buddies' Nighthaunt, because things like the Cronspine and my Underworlds unit that I'd painted up are no longer legal in Games Workshop Warhammer World events, sadly, and the Cronspine is 3 points. So I've got at least a 500 to 700 point deficit of models that I now need to paint up for our event in November that we're doing. I think it's start of November.
start of November, yep.
So yeah, I want to get some stuff for that. And obviously I assume because Nighthaunt are doing so well at the moment, the points of everything will go up. So that means maybe those 500 odd points that maybe I need to paint up is, 200 points instead. I think in an ideal world, I actually want to get 2 units, or 1 reinforced unit, which is for non-AOS players, a unit that's double in size. So instead of it being 10 models, it's 20, for example. But in this case, it will be a 5-man unit doubled to a 10-man unit of the crossbow guys, which is, I want to say, Craven Throne Guard, because I think that shooting would actually be quite good. I think they've got some sort of shenanigans that they can do, so they don't suffer any minus to hit penalties for shooting, and they can ignore line of sight. So they can shoot in your opponent's phase for 1 CP, and they ignore the -1 to hit modifier, and they're reinforced so that you're getting twice as many, so you're getting some efficiency in terms of your CP usage. And the fact that you can shoot in your turn and your opponent's turn means they're quite efficient, I think. And I think they're a bit of a sleepy unit. I think some people are using them, but I think the things that will get nerfed are all the kind of close combat-y stuff for Nighthaunt, and some of the more movement shenanigans stuff like the Dreadblade Harrows that can teleport anywhere on the table at the end of both yours and your opponent's movement phase. If they're going to change it as a rule, I assume they just change it so it can only do that in your movement phase and not your opponent's, because that's the thing that's a bit egregious. But if they don't do that, they just have to whack the points up loads for them.
Yeah, I think points are likely to go up for Nighthaunt. It'd be interesting to see what happens with that, and I guess we can. It's so close. We can probably hold speculation in favor of discussing what actually happens when it actually happens. But I would like to see, I know you're not going to be a fan of it, but I'd like to see their 4-up save change to a 5-up save.
Oh no, that'd be awful.
Well, I think it would balance them quite a bit, because
if they were on the current points, maybe, but I don't know about that, because I think the 4-up is very swingy as it is. Like, yeah, sure, it's doable, but I think trying to do a 5-up save, things would just die far too quickly, I think, in that
But that's
case.
what everyone else deals with, Phil, because there's this thing called Rend in the game. I know you
I know. Well, I sort of have when I'm trying to do it to other people and they've got ridiculous saves. Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to see if they do that. Here's the thing. Part of me thinks they'd rather do points updates than change the War Scrolls. But maybe at this stage, because their codex isn't out, also Battle Tome. However, if it's been written and it's like gone to print, then they probably wouldn't really want to update those things because they're going to invalidate them, right? So then they'd maybe do more of a points adjustment or change some fundamental mechanics. I imagine they could also just change. So the popular pick for your sort of detachments is the one where you can fall back and charge in again. Even though, as we discussed earlier, you don't really need to do that a lot of the time, but it does give you some extra. No, the fact that you can actually advance and charge with it as well is the big thing. So I imagine they would just tweak that instead, because actually, if they remove the advance and charge, that drastically slows down Nighthaunt. In fact, if they did that, I don't think people would bother to pick it. as an option. So yeah, I think they've got some other things they can do in conjunction with points. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, I've been taking a look at the thing I was thinking of potentially adding to my collection and to my building for armies was Kragnos. I was thinking...
yeah. I thought you pretty much got everything for your Iron Jaws.
Yeah, I mean, Craggy is, he's the god of destruction there, right? And the thing is with him is he's very swingy, but he can be very good into things like Archeon, for example.
Yeah.
Now, admittedly, he can be very good into things like Archeon if you roll more than an 8 on 2d6, basically. If you roll...
I mean, it's possible.
Yeah, so basically... His gimmick is when he goes into a monster, you roll 2d6 and you multiply the result.
Yeah, for like the damage, right?
Correct, yeah. So if you roll like 8 on 2d6, that becomes, it depends on how many different variables you want to have of that, but it would be like, I don't know, 5 frees or whatever, or not 5 frees, that's not it. Well, yeah, it'd be 5 frees, so that would be in that instance 15 or...
I think the max you can do is like 36 damage, isn't it?
Correct, yeah. So you can do 36 mortal wounds in a 1 if you roll a double 6. If you roll the 11, it's the 11's 30? Yeah, 30.
Yeah, and that's just on the rampage. That's not his actual attacks. I've played against him in one game and I didn't even really get to scratch him. I just fed him a unit every turn. So he was stuck in combat with them because he can't fall back and charge or anything like that. So you can I kept him out of the game by just giving him some hex wraiths to chew on basically because they were reasonably durable. So it meant he couldn't get into the stuff that's like on the objectives. But yeah, he's very killy. So pretty much anything that's in combat with him is pretty much dead.
Yeah, he's super killy. And that's the thing. I mean, he's 680 odd points. So he's pricey, but I was looking at him. But again, I'll wait to see what the point situation becomes. Because I'm going to run Iron Jaws for November. I'm going to put a bit of work into painting up the units, get them a bit better. I may just take the Maw Crusher for the lols because I've been really... theory crafting that as well and trying to see if there's ways I can make it better. I think it's overpointed, but I think if the points do come down a decent amount, that there's probably a place for a Maw Crusher in my army. The trick with the Maw Crusher seems to be just actually making good use of power through. I think power through is basically the real secret sauce. With that particular unit lives. I
remember hearing something about power through. There's 2 elements to it. One is that you can move in any direction, so you can actually just move back away from the unit in question, because the concept of it and the wording power through makes you think you go through them, but actually they released an FAQ where you said you don't actually get to move over models unless you got the fly keyword. So if you're trying to jump over them, you can't. You're still restricted from your normal movement, which I sort of feels a bit of a shame because the whole point about it is you're just smashing through a unit and the rules sadly don't represent it. But also if you're a really big unit, as you say, like Kragnos or, Tim's Great and Clean One, the base is so big and the movement's normally so low is that you wouldn't physically be able to sort of get past them. So you're powering through, but you're really just shuffling sideways slightly. Which is slightly disappointing.
Well, the Maw Crusher has a unique ability, which is instead of piling in, it moves. So instead of piling in 3 inches, it piles in 2d6. But the problem is it's on a massive base, so you need to roll really high if you want to go over and above.
Yeah, because he can fly, so he can go over.
Yeah, because he can fly, yeah. But the thing is you can use that movement to maybe, move around and then power through afterwards to basically,
get around.
Get around.
Yeah.
And then the thing is that you can't use power through to enter into combat range or something. So you need to be outside of combat range in order to power through. But the great thing with that is that as a Iron Jaws player, you can end up somewhere maybe within 3 inches or just outside of 3 inches of something that you want to get into, and then in the following command phase, you use Mighty Destroyers to enter their combat range and put them in combat.
And what's Might of Destroyers?
Mighty Destroyers is the Iron Jaws ability where they move 3 inches in every command phase. And they can enter combat.
Oh, as part of that. Oh, well, you could always countercharge as another option.
Well, you can't countercharge after a power through.
No, but in their turn. So you
but then
turn.
they'd still get a movement phase where they can move and a shooting phase where they can shoot.
Oh, okay.
Whereas this way you move into combat with them in their command phase.
Oh, you do it then. Okay.
Yeah,
right.
And then they have to choose whether they want to stay in the fight with you or if they leave, take the D3 mortals.
Yeah, okay.
Blah, 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 blah. So there's some interesting... I do think the Maw Crusher does have play. I just need to see where the points land on it. But I think, the more I'm refining lists at the moment, mucking around with the points as they are now, I'm essentially at the moment building Iron Jaws armies that are about 2,150 points and seeing what that kind of looks like and assuming that that's roughly the kind of points decrease I'm going to see.
That seems sensible.
Yeah. So that's what I've kind of been mucking around with. But at the moment, I think I'm just going to wait for. The update before I really deep dive into like list building and theory crafting for November. But I would really like. Here's the thing, right? You've got a beautifully painted Nighthawk army, or at least hopefully you will do. What is painted is nice, basically.
Oh, thank you.
Tim's got a very nice painted Nurgle army. Richie's paintings really come along. He won actually quite a good amount of hobby awards, as in hobby scores at Warhammer World this weekend. So I think for me, I'm very proud of the Maw Crusher that I painted. I think that's really pretty. I think there are some really nice models that I've got in there, but I think it'd just be really good. Again for November, just to sort of really try and not add too many new models to the army, but just take what I've got
and refine it.
That is tabletop ready and just make it what it needs to be. So really kind of go to town on it and just get it finished to a good standard. And then I can finish up this year with a very, very nice looking Iron Jaws collection that makes up, 2,000 point army, and then begin 23, Jesus. We're in 25, that's it. I can begin 25 by looking at options for what I want to do next. Because I've been building Tomb Kings this week, which is super fun. The Bone Dragon is a gorgeous kit. Really, really big fan of that. The old Skellies and stuff, less so, but, at the end of the day, it's quintessential Warhammer, so that's fun. Obviously, you're mucking around with your dwarves, aren't you, Phil?
Yeah. I've gotten out of my eBay frenzy of constantly trying to find some cheap deals, either there or on the Facebook Marketplace, which seem to be my two go-to places for Oldhammer. And I've basically convinced myself now that, because I've already got more than 2,000 points. But I was like wanting to add some things that I didn't have, so I managed to find another cannon because I had one already, but I'd like a second one. So I found one of those and slightly broken but fixable organ gun. So I got those two as my last purchases. I got all the Grudge of Drong minis now via eBay and the Games Workshop website. So I got all of those bits, which was just nice little characters that I sort of wanted. I basically got I think 3rd/4th edition Warhammer Fantasy Metal Dwarf Army, and I want to keep it within that kind of character and time period. So basically 80s and 90s minis. There's definitely a sort of transition from the really old stuff where each model's very individualistic in terms of their look. And then what I think is like kind of maybe like a Colin Dixon style where they get a bit more chunky and robust. And like the army has a much more defined look. So I've got a lot of those. but not all of them. So I've got like a sort of transition period army. So it's not exactly all one unique style, but it's of, as I say, 80s and 90s, which I don't mind. I'm sort of happy with that. And I think I need to, focus on that once I've got these other projects out of the way, have a proper look at what I've got and maybe what else I need to sort of supplement it in terms of maybe I need some like command characters for the units that I've already got and stuff like that. I don't really think I need many more units unless I want to start getting duplicates of certain things. I've kind of got, a unit of hammers, a unit of, iron breakers. I don't think I've actually got a unit of Longbeards, which is one of the more classic units, but I've got loads of everything else.
Have you done much list building thus far? Or?
Not in a super deep way, purely because I've still not read the rules. But I've been playing around with some of the apps, and it's mostly list building, but it's more listing what I own and seeing how many points that is. So I've been doing that using what was it? Is it trying to think of the name. I forget
what it's called now, but it's a really very good app.
Old World Builder is what I'm using, is a website, but you can save it to your home screen as an app, basically, and it acts exactly like an app. And that's what's really good about it is actually it's got like info dumps of the rules. So if it's got a particular, a special weapon's got a particular, attack, you can look at it and it will give you the rules for that. So you get some understanding of what things do prior to me actually buying the rule book, which I'll be doing at some point soon, I think, because I need to sort of properly look at it all. So I've got been doing that, which has helped me sort of work out what I've got and what maybe I need to look at in the future. But because there's two sort of unique army builds for the dwarves. One of them's the Royal Clan, which sort of limits you don't get kind of gunpowder weapons, but your regular dwarves are a bit tougher, or I think a bit stronger than normal. And then the other one, which I quite like, is the Explorator Force, I think is called. Basically, you get sort of you lean more into the miners and the rangers. So miners can get like sort of deep strike ability and can pop up from places. And I've got a unit of miners now, and I've already got a unit of rangers, so that might be quite a useful one to look into. And I think that leans into gyrocopters, and I've got quite a lot of gyrocopters actually. So
nice.
Yeah, I might look at sort of theming a force around that a bit more. Although I think that one you need, because it gives you access to the Bugman's carts. So I need to buy that at some point, because dwarves really suffer from movement. I believe they have it's either movement 3 or movement 4.
I think it's mostly movement 4.
Yeah, I think it's 4, which is, even movement of 5 inches is terribly slow. So the fact it's 4 is like, oh dear God. But you can do.
It's not crazy slow for Old World though.
No, true. And
it's slow. Like no one's pretending it's not.
Yeah,
slow,
it's very slow. But I think the dwarf play style is you have enough long range weapons to force your opponent to come to you. And not just try and outrange you because you've got some cannons, so you're going to do some damage. Or I think there's like a combo you can do with the anvil and the Bugman's cart, so you can sort of slingshot one unit up the board at turn 1. I've seen loads of people talk about that. I've seen loads of people talk about, this is the best artillery piece for whatever reasons, and I'm sort of ignoring all of those sort of online list building sort of things, because it's like I just want to play with what I've got and see for myself how good things are, or I just want to play to a theme, so I don't necessarily care. And maybe once I've played a bunch of games and I've lost them all, then I'll be like, okay, let's get out the big guns and bring the filth. But until then, I'm quite happy just playing with what I've got.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, when it comes to Old World, I think much like Heresy, it's a game that is kind of best enjoyed in a kind of more kind of connoisseur's ideology. And obviously, I think Heresy is a game that gets good levels of support on a sort of event and tournament basis, and certainly Old World is as well. I think Old World events have been very popular, which is super awesome. But I think, the kind of attitude and mood of this game and those players is more that it is, it's a gentleman's game, and it's one that is to be enjoyed and savoured for being that specifically. And I think ultimately, yes, you can, and I'm sure plenty of people do, lean into the more competitive elements of it and build some absolutely crazy stuff. But I think for most people, it's about putting together really beautiful collections of armies that appeal to them for the various reasons that they appeal to them, and playing it for fun, as it were. I think games like 40k and AOS, that kind of modern GW system, certainly within AOS, I feel like there is this kind of attitude that competitive gaming within AOS is completely acceptable. And although there are plenty of people who do it for funsies and have a bit more of a casual outlook on it, I think the higher end of AOS play is not really kind of frowned upon in the same way as maybe even 40k. But then 40k, I think, has really embraced the competitive mindset also. I just think people don't like losing very much, which is fair enough. But yeah, I think that's the thing with games like Old World. It's like, who cares if you've got the most optimized force? It's just put some fun stuff down, rank and flank, see what happens,
Yeah, I the more I think about it, the more I genuinely think the specialist design studio that is Horus Heresy, that is the Old World, those, and even things like Necromunda, right? Those games are more designed for me than 40k and AOS. And I think that might in part be an age thing, and that the 40k and AOS is designed for sort of a younger audience in mind, whereas I'm sort of a vintage where, rules were written in a certain way, and as you say, there was a more of a kind of casual agreement of, the gentleman's hobby of when you're gaming. Not to say there weren't cutthroat people back in those days as well, but also more of a focus on narrative gaming. And I feel like those games tick those boxes more. And I just don't see, even AOS isn't really doing much in terms of like narrative support, and that they are just focused on this sort of high churn of the editions and, more of a competitive game. And, that's totally acceptable, that's what people want. But I think in my heart of heart, as that game style isn't my preference. And I don't know if that's just my mindset or the age that I am. Oh, it's probably.
Well, I think they're one and the same, mate. Yeah, absolutely. I think ultimately you're right, and I think AOS has done a lot of really great work with AOS4 of constructing a narrative. The 40k narrative is kind of weirdly regressive in the way that, like, I think 40k as it was 9 years ago was a really, really, really great narrative. And then they brought Gilliman back and the whole thing kind of went, topsy-turvy. I think, for me, peak 40k is that kind of 2012 period when we started seeing the expansions of concepts like the Badab War and that kind of stuff. Although actually I think that was more 2010. Maybe even 2009 and earlier.
Yeah, because I think that's predated the Horus Heresy. I mean, when I meant narrative, I did mean more the being able to do narrative style games and like specific, narrative missions. However, you are right in terms of the narratives of the settings aren't as maybe strong. But then I think with Old World, you've got such a rich foundation of literally, almost 40 years basically to tap into, that people have just have been aware of through games, media, the actual but when I say games I mean computer games and things like that, in addition to the actual game itself, whereas as you say, AOS is very new and fresh still, and that is developing, and as you say, with 40k it's moved along in its in the timeline, and not in a way that is necessarily great. Although, despite that,
I think it's still good at times.
I enjoy the fact that they are moving it along, and I think with AOS, I think it's fantastic that they out the gate was like every edition we're moving the story forwards, and I enjoy that progression within it. I just don't feel it's necessarily been outstanding stories within 40k, and some of the. As much as I think introducing Primaris and the sort of the new technology of the Imperium undercuts the very foundation of what is good about 40k, is in terms of it's all meant to be lost archaic technology in a stagnating Imperium, and that it's no longer that. However, I kind of like all the cool new models, so it's a double-edged sword, so to speak.
Yeah, I think the thing with 40k is that I think Black Library are doing amazing work within that space. I think there have been some own goals in terms of storytelling around bringing back characters or doing things in support of actual kind of product releases. I think where it's weakest is the work that goes into supporting the range releases, but where it's strongest is where it explores things beyond the game. I think, The Emperor's Spears is a really great example of a really great book about a really interesting concept about the Imperium Nihilus and all the kind of mad stuff that goes on down there, and fleshing out that whole world. I think some of the new crime series novels they've been doing in 40k, really interesting and seem really good. So I think that's the thing. I think narratively they're doing interesting stuff. I think where they always fall short is kind of like the mainline narrative that coincides with the model releases. I think, that's where everything feels a little bit rushed and a little bit thrust together, where they're like, oh, we need to come up with some literature to, market the new miniatures. And then it always feels like that's the bit where it gets a little bit like, for no reason at all, these things are doing a thing and they're all together. Figure it out.
I mean, I think personally, if you're going to have a storyline that is leading the edition, so you have like the Arcs of Omen books, and before that you have the, Prior Nexus, Gathering Storm, and all of that. Not Prior Nexus, Psychic Awakening. You had all of those, and ideally that should be a cohesive story. And if it's ideally, it will be Imperium versus Chaos. That is the main foundation of these big narrative story beats, because ultimately that's what it sort of has to be about. Things like the Leviathan box, I totally understand, but it feels like you're then doing a 180, sorry, or 360. You're spinning around, basically.
If you did a 360, you'd be back.
No, exactly. But you go like, where have I been? No, you're doing a 180.
Yeah. If you did a 380, you'd be completely confused.
Yeah, if you're doing a 180 in terms of a storyline, and it's like, oh, well, now you're diverting our attention and you're talking about this other thing, and it's like, I would much rather that story be told in like a separate campaign book or a Warzone book. So it's like the main story is being told on a kind of consistent basis. And then you going, cool, but then now there's these campaign books which are telling these offshoot storylines that could be, about orcs, elder, tyranids, whatever, even the chaos. I think it's difficult. It's weird. It feels like the AOS story is a bit more cohesive, but then maybe I haven't been following it as much. But a rough glance, it seems to... Maybe it's because there's no big... I mean, Chaos is still the big bad, even in Age of Sigma. But the jumping around between different factions just seems normal in that setting, whereas maybe... Yeah. I don't know. It's
nothing's quite as well established in that world yet. I think they're getting there.
So they can get away with it, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. But there's just nowhere near the same kind of weight and circumstance behind it. And this is the thing, like the narrative around the Eye of Terror, or rather the Great Rift, Chaos, the forces of the Imperium, that whole kind of bit is so beautifully developed and crafted. It stands as this really amazing thing. And so much else is then sort of supplementary to it. I think the Elder story is quite well developed in terms of its history. And I think now in its kind of present setting, it has more of a kind of soothsayery, mystic kind of, it's a very kind of nebulous thing that they kind of layer on top.
They just come along to the Imperium and we've seen the future. And the Imperium people are like, can you tell us? And they're like, not really, no. But something's happening.
I think the worst thing is they go, I've seen the future. And then the Imperium goes, kill them! And then that's basically the way that goes. But that's what I think. But then, so I think Elder and Chaos and the Imperium, They're something. Nids are kind of just, they're Nids. What are they doing? Why are they doing it? We don't really know. Or do we? Ooh. So, okay, cool, intriguing. Orcs, it's like, they're orcs. They're just here to fight. They're mushrooms. Get on with it. And then they're probably like the most fleshed out bits outside of the forces of Imperium and Chaos. And then after that, you go, Leagues of Votan. What's their deal? Ooh, AI or something. We'll tell you later. Don't worry, we'll figure it out. And then Tau, it's like, oh yeah, ooh, Tau. Recruit and stuff. I don't know.
Necrons. You got Necrons. I think that they've got a good their overall sort of the awakening of the Tomb Worlds. I like as a concept, and that's very easy to tell as like a kind of campaign structure. Yeah, it's interesting. Tau is very small, but they've always been like confined to a certain area. So obviously they did that Lost Fifth expansion to try and basically broaden their horizons of where they are within the galaxy. And yeah, Votan's an interesting one because they're sort of like an ally to the Imperium. So they're there, but they're not like a threat to the Imperium per se, because they're more of an ally for them. But I guess they're just another faction that you can play, and they're obviously they have dealings and threats with the other Xenos races.
Yeah, and I think that's it, really. I think ultimately, I understand that you aren't going to flesh out Tau to the same extent that you are Space Marines and the Imperium and all that stuff, right? But that's the thing. It's very rare at the moment that they go really deep into those kind of stories and explore those ideas further, which is fine because at the end of the day, the core IP is the Imperium of Man, so that's what we stick with. And at the end of the day, do we really need to know a lot of really interesting, extra, big, heroic stories about the Tau? No, not really. The Tau, it's fine. But yeah, I think that's the thing. I think that's what kind of hinders the narrative sometimes, though, is that they try and make us care or try and craft stories where they go, time to talk about Tau, and you're like, oh god, I don't care.
I mean, in their defense, because I haven't really read anything about Tau other than the surface level stuff. But in terms of like narrative stories, the only time I'd really read anything about them was in the Ox of Omen series, where it was a whole book for Farsight, and I quite liked their story. Like,
I do too.
That was actually, I think, pretty well done, and it was, the Farsight Enclave versus sort of the Tau Empire, and you got to see their dynamic between them, where he was like, we really need some help, and the Tau Empire were like, you're on your own, you've made your bed, you've got to lie in it. So I thought that was pretty good. Overall, they've always been sort of one of my least favorite factions in 40k, because I was around before they were a thing, so that's why.
I think I've maybe not made my point very fair there, because I do like the Tau story. I think it's very good. I just think what I'm saying is it's not as fleshed out as the Imperium, and as a faction, they're kind of defined. They're in one very specific part of space, and okay, things come and have a go at them, but they're kind of like, I don't know. It always sort of feels like with Tau, it's never, I don't know. Like I say, there's more that can be done there, but at the same time, what they have done is really good. I just think, narratively, sometimes with 40k, it always feels a little bit all over the place as a result. But anyway, I think, ultimately, the current state of the narratives and narrative gaming is the fact is the old world and Horus Heresy are just way more fleshed out in terms of the stuff that you can do with it. And in a way, because all of this stuff has kind of been written in almost a kind of historical fashion, it has a greater weight and circumstance to it, because you feel more of a because there are tomes and literature that speak to the Force organization of Bretonnians, and as a result, you start to become more invested in the iconography and the colors and the everything. It just feels more weighty, I suppose. It feels realer, I suppose.
Yeah, there's more stuff to be obsessed by in terms of just say heraldry for both Horus Heresy and for the Old World. And I think the way that maybe it's like, because they can go, we're retelling a story. Here's the Battle of Istvan 3 or 5, and it's like, we know the ending, we know what happened, because you've read the Black Library books, or you're just aware of it. But you can play now the mission, and I love that as a concept. And in the 40k stuff, it doesn't really ever seem to do it as much. I mean, it's
because they're never brave enough to kill anyone off.
Or it's because, I guess, maybe at least with Heresy, you've got the Black Library novels to tie into that gives it the gravitas of, I've read the novels of what happened. Now I want to play the game and sort of recreate those missions. And you don't have that in the old world. It's like technically historical, but no one's read the stories of, these battles that you can then play. And in 40k, it's like what they've done is like they've gone, cool, here's a campaign book that you are reading for the first time. And it's like, yeah, here's a couple of missions to do bits of it. But maybe because it hasn't quite got the Black Library tie and it's missing that gravitas that we were talking about that Heresy has, at least.
I disagree with the fact that Old World doesn't have that. Yes, they don't have it to the same extent as Heresy, but I think what they've done in Old World over the years, or rather specifically the Warhammer Fantasy universe, is they've created all of this kind of global stakes, and they've created very, well-defined and well-supported infrastructures and maps and diagrams that speak to the conflicts. And I think that really elevates it as well. So even if it is that you don't know the historic tale of how, this dark elf lord and this high elf lord are brothers and hate each other and blah, 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 blah. If you don't know all the nuances of the different empires or the different emperors of mankind in, in the empire and in fantasy, whether, if you don't know all of that, but, there is a bit of a kind of, but you can see that there is a kind of conflict between these factions in these places and these things, the Tomb Kings will fight with, I don't know who neighbours the Tomb Kings off the top of my head. That's probably a bad one. But, I don't know, the Empire will fight with Chaos a lot because they're very,
geographically close to each other.
Yeah. And then, the Orcs are kind of roaming around doing their thing. And then there's, the Ogres come down from the mountains. And, it's that thing where, I think that gives it, because it's got rules. It's got, the idea. And I don't just mean game rules. I mean, the world has rules, the idea that things are in their place, and it creates a kind of interesting sort of relatable setting, I suppose, which is nice.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, for 40k, the Arcs of Omen series, I think it gave us a sort of narrative of, there's all these boarding actions happening. You can all take part, whether you're Imperial, you're Chaos, or you're Xenos. You can be like, cool, we're going to go aboard a Hulk, a Space Hulk, and we're going to fight some missions, and we're either going to be stealing keys or, defending them and what have you. And I like that kind of, it was like a sort of global excitement for all wanting to be involved in the same sort of narrative at the same time. That was really good. And I think the previous time we had that was on Vigilus, where there was a campaign book all about that. Where
I love Vigilus. I was a fan of Vigilus.
I get onto, but my point I was going to make, and I think the reason why we sort of don't have these strong narratives anymore is because Games Workshop wants every mission to be playable by every faction. And by doing that, it's sort of no longer special. It's no longer this battle was specifically Imperial Guard versus Orcs, and it was, on Armageddon. And, you could technically play it with anyone, but here's the mission, and here's the armies that were involved in that mission if you want to recreate it. They used to do that quite a lot. And I feel like now they're just trying to make everything a bit more generic, so everyone can be involved and everyone can play all the games. But in doing so, it sort of loses out on its sort of, that special narrative touch.
No, I do agree with you. Anyway, I reckon we've talked for long enough now, Phil. It's been a delight as always. Thank you everyone for listening. That's episode 189 done and dusted. Next week we will genuinely, or rather not next week, next episode we will get around to do Agents of the Imperium. So look forward to that. But until then, goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
made you cry. So before we die, I'd like to do something nice. I want to buy you something, but I don't have any money. No, I don't have any money. I want to buy you something, but I don't have any money. No, I don't have any money. Whoa, oh, 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 and if I had a gun, I would trade in my gun. If I had a gun, I would trade in my gun. And if we ran from the country, but the rest of the city. And now there's nothing to be done, there's nothing to be done, there's nothing to be done, there's nothing to be done. I want to buy you something, but I don't have any money. No, I don't have any money. I want to buy you something, but I don't have any money. No, I don't have any money. Whoa, oh, 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 and I want to buy you something, but I don't have any money. No, I don't have any money. I want to buy you something, but I don't have any money. No, I don't have any money. I want to buy you something. I don't have any money. No, I don't have any money, money, money. Yeah. I wanna buy you something, but I don't have any money. No, I don't have any money. Oh, 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 come on, it's on Monday, the first day of tour lands on a Monday.